Chapter 9:29. As soon as the Jade archive fell into Yu Qianzhou's hand, Li Duxing snatched it and quickly injected his divine sense into it. But after reading it, he immediately looked at Yu Qianzhou with disdain and threw it back to Yu Qianzhou. It could be said that he had a deeper understanding of Yu Qianzhou's character. The contents of the Jade archive were the words that Yu Qianzhou made up to trick Lu Yanqing to come back. The general meaning was that when Lanfeng came back with serious injuries and wanted to see Lu Yanqing again before he died, Li Duxing had to admit that such words really hit Lu Yanqing's soft spot. Based on Lu Yanqing's character, as long as she saw the contents of the Jade archive, she would risk her life to come back. Then again, this also convinced Li Duxing that Yu Qianzhou did not lie to him. Lu Yanqing did not come back voluntarily. Wei Chunxiu, who was sitting cross-legged, glanced at Yu Qianzhou and chuckled coldly. His character wasn't that great either, and he couldn't hold back for a moment. He had long since seen the contents inside. Yu Qianzhou looked at the two of them, who were seated on one side and standing on the other, and laughed awkwardly. He had crushed the Jade archive in his hand. It could be considered as a last-ditch effort to erase the evidence. Li Duxing, if there's nothing else, go back first. Yu Qianzhou laughed as if nothing had happened. Miss is in Paradise Wonderland. Li Duxing frowned and muttered. Yu Qianzhou was startled. He stared at him with a serious face and warned, Li Duxing, you'd better not act recklessly. Paradise Wonderland is not a place you can trespass. The top masters of the immortal world gather there. With your current cultivation, going there is no different from seeking death. Besides, even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for the World Chamber of Commerce. Don't mess with the Immortal Palace and bring trouble to everyone. Don't worry, I will get Lu Yanqing back when I have the chance. I know what I'm capable of. Li Duxing shook his head to show that he knew what to do. After hesitating for a while, he frowned and asked, Headmaster, do you know where Lanfeng went for cultivation? He didn't say that. Before he left, he only said that he had lost the ability to protect Lu Yanqing. He hoped to find back the ability to protect her. Yu Qianzhou paused for a moment, then sighed. I think he wants to find back his dignity even more. At the very least, he wanted to regain his dignity in front of Lu Yanqing. A man who was trapped by love. Why do you have to do this? Li Duxing fell into silence. After a long time, a resolute look flashed on his face. He slowly raised his head to look at Yu Qianzhou and said in cadence, My life was saved by Mississippi. Although Miss doesn't care about it, I once swore to Miss that as long as Miss needs me, I will do anything for you. A man should never go back on his words, but the situation here really makes me blush with shame. If Miss really needs me one day, I'm afraid I'll be powerless. What Lanfeng did was right. What do you mean? Yu Qianzhou's pupils suddenly shrank. He had already guessed what he wanted to do. Li Duxing's eyes suddenly burst out a vigorous fighting spirit. He stared at Yu Qianzhou's eyes and said word by word, Among the people I have met in my life, the one I admire the most is your master. Although I almost died in his hands, I admit my defeat. My greatest wish in this life is to have the qualifications to fight with him again. I believe that he is still alive, and perhaps I will have the chance to see him again. If I can fight with him again, I will die without regrets. Yu Qianzhou looked at him speechlessly. He found that there were always people who overestimated themselves in this world. They were not opponents of the same level at that time, and now the gap between them was like heaven and earth. If the old guy was still alive, you would die without regret if you provoked him again. There would not always be someone to save your life at the critical moment. Just say it. What do you want to say? Yu Qianzhou squinted his eyes and moved his fingers behind his back. Li Duxing immediately sensed a faint murderous intent from Yu Qianzhou, but he still said without fear, When Lanfeng can work hard, but Li Duxing, won't stop here. Yu Qianzhou's eyes flashed with fierceness. He said, I know what you mean. You also want to learn from Lanfeng and go out to practice alone. But you have to know that the wind and rain outside are treacherous. There's something I might as well tell you in advance. Before long, I'll be able to let everyone in the World Chamber of Commerce step into the immortal realm. This is a rare opportunity. Don't miss it. There is a plum garden in the ghost village. In the cold winter, thousands of trees wither, but only the fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. Only by climbing the perilous peak can you see the wonderful scenery that others can't. People are born in hardships and die in peace. Lee Duxing turned around resolutely and said while walking, "Don't worry, leader you. No one can pry a word of the secret of World Chamber of Commerce out of my mouth. If you let me go today, I hope I can come back alive to repay you." He knew that he was no match for Yu Qianqiu. If Yu Qianqiu didn't let him go, he couldn't leave at all. Moreover, there was green-winged Bat King Wei Chunqiu, who was at the early stage of a mortal emperor beside Yu Qianqiu. He also knew that Yu Qianqiu was a cruel and merciless person. He was gambling. Yu Qianqiu looked ferociously at Li Duxing's back, disappearing in the corridor. He clenched his fist behind his back, but for some reason, he didn't do anything to him in the end. Wei Chunqiu, who was sitting cross-legged, stood up at some point. Looking at Li Duxing's disappearing back, he said thoughtfully, "The fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. Only by climbing the perilous peak can you see the wonderful scenery that others can't. People are born in hardships and die in peace. This person has a high state of mind, and his talent in cultivation is also extraordinary. He may have a place in the immortal realm in the future, but the premise is that he can save his life outside. Damn it, you're all crazy and self-righteous. Be careful that no one will collect your corpse when you die outside." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and shouted very unhappily. Fortunately, Wei Chunqiu had set a soundproof bounded domain here, otherwise it would disturb Bai Suzhen's repair. To be honest, after getting along with these people for a long time, I always have a question. Where did you get these subordinates of yours in the Huashan realm? These people are definitely not like the disciples in the Huashan realm of ordinary sects, nor are they like the individual cultivators outside. Each of them has an extraordinary aptitude, and their talent in cultivation is also stronger than the other. They're all rare seedlings. If they could be given some time and opportunities, their achievements in the future should not be too bad. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes on the spot and said, "It's none of your business." Wei Chunqiu snorted and said, "I saw that you wanted to kill him just now. Why did you let him go? Am I that kind of person who kills innocent people?" Yu Qianqiu said angrily. "Oh," Wei Chunqiu said noncommittally. Then he asked curiously, "Who on earth is your master?" For what he said just now, it seems that your master is not simple. Anyway, he is better than you. Yu Qianqiu's words were sarcastic. Obviously, he was in a bad mood. There were only a few top masters in the human world, but the two most powerful ones had left him. Wei Chunqiu snorted coldly. He didn't take Yu Qianqiu's words seriously. He had weighed Li Duxing's cultivation, and it was really not worth mentioning. However, Li Duxing could escape from the hands of Master Yu Qianqiu. Then it could be imagined that Master Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was high. Hearing his disdainful sneer, Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at him. He didn't bother to explain anything to him, and there was no need to use Bai Changchun to show off. After all, he didn't know whether Bai Changchun was dead or alive. Thus, he swung his sleeves and left. Wei Chunqiu shouted behind him, "You'd better pay attention to the things that Bai Suzhen needs for cultivation." "Got it." Yu Qianqiu replied, went directly to a room on the 22nd floor, opened the window, and flew out. He originally wanted to express his condolences to Shui Mingqing's death at the branch of Chaotian Palace in the hallucinatory Immortal City. Unexpectedly, as soon as he flew out of the territory of the World Chamber of Commerce, he found that he was targeted. Looking back, he saw 3 people in blue following him. Judging from their clothes, they were from the Heartless Palace. It seemed that Yu Nanshan's information was right. Songyun Xian really targeted him and wanted to avenge his grandson. Yu Qianqiu sneered. He thought that the people of the Heartless Palace dared not attack him in the hallucinatory Immortal City, so he let them follow him. After landing outside the gate of the Chaotian Palace, he looked around. The 3 people in blue were floating in a triangle above the branch of the Chaotian Palace. It was clear that they didn't want to give him any chance to slip away. Yu Qianqiu didn't bother to pay attention to them and strode into the branch of the Chaotian Palace. As soon as he entered, someone immediately went to inform the elder in charge of the Chaotian Palace. Yadonglu stood at the door of the back hall with a smile on his face and welcomed him in. After both sides sat down, Yadonglu asked with a smile, "Welcome, Sect Leader Yu. What can I do for you?" Yu Qianshou asked with a dignified expression. "I heard that Shui Mingqing was killed in the Chaotian Palace. Is this true?" Yadonglu's expression froze. This matter had caused quite a stir in the Chaotian Palace. Although it was a small disciple who died, the serious thing was that someone had secretly killed someone in the Chaotian Palace without anyone knowing. What was even more frightening was that they did not know whether the murderer was an insider of Skyward Palace or an outsider who had sneaked in to do it. However, Shui Mingqing's master, Master Yifuzi, insisted that it was his own people who had done it. He first targeted several of his opponents in the sect. In fact, many people in the Chaotian Palace thought the same because there was really no need for outsiders to sneak in and kill a small disciple like Shui Mingqing. However, because the ranking contest was imminent, this matter was temporarily suppressed by the Chaotian Palace leader. However, after this matter spread to the outside world, there were various versions. Because Shui Mingqing was somewhat famous outside, it became a moderate scandal in the Palace of Heaven. Many people suspected that it was the result of internal strife in the Palace of Heaven. It seems to be true. After a moment of regret, Yu Qianshou said with an angry expression, "Brother Shui has always been modest and has never offended anyone. I didn't expect someone to kill him. Don't let me know who did it, or I won't forgive him." Yadonglu forced a smile and said, "It seems that the relationship between Sect Leader Yu and Shui Mingqing is not shallow. However, this is our own matter, and we will solve it ourselves. We don't need outsiders to intervene." Yu Qianshou said with an unfriendly expression, "Oh, don't misunderstand. I don't want to intervene in the affairs of your Chaotian Palace, but I have no choice. Everyone knows that I have a good relationship with Shui Mingqing, so it's a bit unreasonable not to say anything. I'm just going through the motions, and I'll leave after a while. Did Sect Leader you come here for this matter?" Yadonglu changed the topic indifferently. "I heard that the Heartless Palace's high priest, Songyun Exen, has personally taken charge of the fantasy Immortal City. There is news that he is here for you. Sect Leader you need to prepare early." The two of them suddenly didn't see eye to eye. After a while, Yu Qianshou said goodbye. After leaving the Chaotian Palace branch, he glanced at the sky and found that the three people were still guarding in the air. He immediately turned into a stream of light and rushed out of the fantasy Immortal City. Turning into a stream of light, Immortal Stage Cultivation? The three people were stunned and looked at each other, thinking that they had seen wrong. However, the three of them clearly saw that the person who left was indeed Yu Qianshou. Chapter 9:30. Follow him, don't let him escape. Two streams of light immediately chased after Yu Qianshou, while the other person quickly took out a jade talisman and crushed it. Soon, a stream of light shot out from the Passionless Palace branch and chased after Yu Qianshou. This person was none other than Songyun Xin, who had been waiting in the hallucination Immortal City for a long time. Suddenly, someone said in surprise, "It's World Commerce's Sect Leader Yu Qianshou. His cultivation base has broken through to Immortal level." Soon, another two streams of light flashed before everyone's eyes. Someone clicked his tongue and said, "It's Passionless Palace's people chasing after Yu Qianshou. This Passionless Palace is really capable. They actually forced Yu Qianshou, the coward, out of the hallucination Immortal City." Streams of light appeared and looked. Soon, another stream of light flashed like a star arrow. Many people cried out, "It's Songyun Xin." Yu Qianshou was forced out of the hallucination Immortal City. Songyun Xin personally chased after him. "There's going to be a show." "Not necessarily. I heard that Songyun Xin couldn't kill Yu Qianshou in the blissful Immortal realm. I'm afraid Songyun Xin was worried about the Immortal Palace and couldn't make a move under their watch. That's why Yu Qianshou was lucky enough to escape. They're all going to watch the show. Come, let's go take a look too." The people floating in the air turned into streams of light and chased after them like a meteor shower. On the top floor of the World Commerce, Yunpeng's eyes suddenly became as sharp as an eagle's. He stared at the people flocking in the distance. However, the distance was too far. He didn't see that Yu Qianqiu was being chased, so he just looked and didn't take it to heart. In the Skyward Palace branch, a disciple quickly ran into the inner hall and reported to the Yidong Lu with cupped fists. Reporting to Elder, the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce's Sect leader was targeted by the Heartless Palace as soon as he left our place. At this moment, he has already been chased out of illusory, immortal city by the people of Heartless Palace. And Heartless Palace's grand revered Xian has personally chased after him. What? Yidong Lu, who was sitting calmly in the inner hall, suddenly turned around and said in shock, Yu Qianqiu must have taken the wrong medicine. Of all places to run, they actually ran outside the illusory immortal city. Wasn't this courting death? Oh, right. Is there any movement from the World Chamber of Commerce? This disciple specially observed for a while. Everything happened so suddenly, and there was no movement from the World Commerce Association. It seems like they don't know that Yu Qianqiu is being pursued by the Heartless Palace. Strange, what method did the Heartless Palace use to actually force the coward Yu Qianqiu out of the illusory immortal city? Yidonglu pondered for a while, then narrowed his eyes and laughed sinisterly. The Heartless Palace has been in the limelight these years. I want to see the scene of Cyan Wingbat King and White Cloud Mountain Master joining hands to fight Sanyan Xian. I wonder if Sanyan Xian can block the two of them. The battle of three early-stage Immortal Emperor experts is really exciting. As soon as he finished speaking, Yidonglu turned into a stream of light and shot out of the inner hall directly towards the direction of the World Commerce Association. After flying above the World Commerce Association, Yidonglu immediately noticed that Yunpeng's eyes were locked on him. He flashed and landed beside Yunpeng. Before Yunpeng could do anything, he cupped his hands and exclaimed, Senior Yun, it's bad. When Yu Qianqiu came out of my Heaven Palace branch, he was targeted by the Heartless Palace. Now he has been tricked out of the illusory immortal city by the Heartless Palace's High Priest Sanyan Xian is personally pursuing him. Yu Qianqiu is in danger. Please be prepared, Senior Yun. The cold and indifferent Yunpeng's eyes narrowed when he heard that. He had seen Yu Qianqiu leave earlier, and he had also seen Yu Qianqiu being targeted by the people of Heartless Palace. However, when he thought about how the people of Heartless Palace didn't dare to do anything to Yu Qianqiu within the illusionary immortal city, he didn't take it to heart. How could he have known that Yu Qianqiu would be so stupid as to run out of the illusory immortal city? A green shadow swept over and Wei Chunqiu appeared. His small eyes emitted a faint green light as he stared at Yidonglu and shouted sternly, Is what you said true? Yidonglu had always wanted the world to be in chaos, so he deliberately raised his voice to let Wei Chunqiu hear him. Now that he had succeeded, he couldn't help but be secretly delighted. He immediately cupped his hands and said with a solemn expression, Senior Wei, I saw it with my own eyes. It can't be wrong. Wei Chunqiu suddenly turned his head and looked into the distance. He could still see streams of light gathering in one direction. They were actually people rushing to watch the show. He pointed and asked, That direction? Senior Wei is wise. It's that direction. Yidonglu's attitude was unprecedentedly polite and respectful. Wei Chunqiu immediately looked at Yunpeng with a sinister expression and said, There's no time to lose. You and I will go together and kill that Song guy. Yunpeng frowned and stared sharply at Yidonglu. He said in a deep voice, The human heart is sinister. It's obvious that this person came with evil intentions. You guard here and be careful of someone taking advantage of the situation. After saying that, he turned into a white stream of light and flew at a speed faster than a meteor, creating waves in the air. He quickly flew in the direction that everyone was rushing to. Yidonglu was speechless by Yunpeng's words. He wanted to explain, but found that Yunpeng had already left. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had long heard that White Cloud Mountain Master didn't have a good impression of humans, but he didn't expect his words to be so direct. He didn't even hold back and said that he came with evil intentions in front of him. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have come personally. Wei Chunxiu was currently in a very bad mood. In addition to Yun Peng's words, he immediately shouted at Yidonglu, "Scram!" Yidonglu was stunned and wanted to slap himself. He could only blame it on his bad luck and dejectedly left. He also flew in the direction that everyone was flying to watch the show. Wei Chunxiu cast his gaze into the distance. At this moment, Bai Sujin was quietly cultivating. Without anyone protecting her, it would be very dangerous for her. However, Yu Qianshou was in control of his Naiden. If something were to happen, he would be in deep trouble. He calmed his mind and returned downstairs to continue protecting Bai Sujin. Yu Qianshou flew as fast as lightning out of the hallucinatory immortal city. He looked back in the air and saw two streams of light quickly catching up. He immediately sneered and muttered, "Good. I'll use you too to test the waters." He immediately held two purple flames in his palms and sped through the air without looking back. At this time, a sudden gust of wind rose high up in the sky, but in the blink of an eye, there was a faint rumbling sound of thunder in the sky. For a time, the wind rose and the clouds surged, and the sky gradually darkened. No one knew where the gray fog came from, but the world was filled with a gloomy haze. The two streams of light that were about to catch up with Yu Qianshou suddenly felt a huge resistance. Their speed immediately dropped. Their cultivation was clearly higher than Yu Qianshou's, but at this moment, the distance between them and Yu Qianshou was getting bigger and bigger. The two looked at each other, speechlessly, with bewilderment in their eyes. They saw the gale in front of them like stormy waves pushing forward layer by layer. The wind was like a blade, so they had no choice but to protect themselves with their earth energy. They immediately heard the sound of knocking on their earth energy shields. What caused the two of them to be bewildered was that such a rare and powerful wind resistance seemed to have no effect on Yu Qianshou, who was in front of them. That guy was still flying very nimbly as he frantically fled forward, widening the distance between him and the two of them. The gale became stronger and stronger, and the gray fog in the sky became darker and denser. Not long after, the dark sky was filled with crackling thunderbolts, and the rumbling sound of thunder and lightning could be heard everywhere. Yu Qianshou was like a swift in the storm, happily shuttling through the crisscrossing thunder. After rushing to the center of the minefield in the sky, Yu Qianshou immediately calmed down. He suddenly stopped flying and turned around to hover in the air. He coldly looked at the two people who were chasing after him. The gale suddenly weakened, and the two people immediately felt the strong wind pressure disappear. They immediately rushed over, but when they flew to the edge of the minefield, they stopped at the same time. Looking at the unfathomable thick and thin zigzagging thunder under the dark clouds, the two people looked at each other. Thunder was not something to be trifled with. It was impossible to predict when it would strike here and there. Most importantly, the speed of thunder was too fast. It was not much inferior to teleportation, and it was very difficult to dodge. A streak of light shot over, and Grey Cloud Xian appeared between the two of them. He was also startled by the lightning bolts that filled the sky. He did not know how such a situation could occur. Such a dense amount of lightning bolts was simply unimaginable, giving off a feeling of the wrath of the heavens and the resentment of men. Xian Xian, your heartless palace is chasing after me relentlessly. What is your intention? Yu Qianshou asked despite knowing the answer. Songyun Xian's gaze quickly turned to the center of the minefield. He saw Yu Qianshou standing there quietly. In the darkness, zigzagging and sinister lightning flashed in front of him, behind him, and to his left and right. It was a very shocking scene. The crowd that came to watch the show also looked at each other when they saw this scene. A cold smile gradually appeared on Songyun Xian's face. This brat was obviously at the end of his rope. In order to escape, he actually took the risk to hide in the minefield. He immediately laughed wildly and said, "Yu Qianshou, when you killed Song Lianqing, you should have known that this day would come. Now that death is at hand, let's see where you can run to." Run? With just a shameless old dog like you? Yu Qianshou said with a disdainful expression, "The world is so big. I can leave and stay as I please. This was proven when you chased after me in the Paradise Wonderland. What do you do to me?" The crowd that was watching the show immediately burst into an uproar. They all sighed at this guy's audacity. He actually dared to speak to Tsangyun Xian like this. It seemed like he really knew that death was at hand and was ready to throw caution to the wind. Under the flickering lightning, Tsangyun Xian's expression was a little twisted. Yu Qianshou's words had really hit his soft spot. That time, he had let Yu Qianshou escape right under his nose. He had always been deeply ashamed, and the last thing he wanted was to hear someone mention it to his face. He immediately ordered in a low voice, "Kill him." Chapter 9:31. The two people on the left and right looked at the lightning that was like the roots of a large tree and felt their scalps go numb. They didn't have the courage to ask Yu Qianshou to be struck by lightning, so they couldn't help but be stunned. Yu Qianshou, who was in the center of the lightning zone, laughed and said, "As the saying goes, soldiers are all in one, generals are all in one. The great consecrator of Heartless Palace is afraid of death and actually wants his disciples to come out and die. You have really opened my eyes." Everyone's gazes immediately landed on Tsangyun Xian. Tsangyun Xian's countenance instantly turned ashen. The thunderbolts that filled the sky had indeed caused him to feel apprehensive. He had sent his two disciples to act as a safety measure. He wanted to see how powerful the thunderbolts were. If his two disciples could dodge and deal with it, then he could naturally deal with it as well. "Kill him," Tsangyun Xian shouted angrily. He wanted to force his two disciples into the lightning zone to test the waters. Now that things had come to this, the two disciples had no way out. They looked at each other and gritted their teeth. Both of them took out their flying swords. Two rays of light cut through the dark space and rapidly attacked Yu Qianshou, who was in the depths of the lightning zone. They had a good idea, hoping that long-range attacks could kill Yu Qianshou. Of course, they also wanted to test the safety of using their flying swords. Unfortunately, as soon as the two rays of light entered the lightning zone, they immediately provoked the heavenly thunder. More than a dozen bolts of lightning mercilessly struck down. Two bolts of lightning immediately created two balls of sparks in the air. The two flying swords appeared, but the bodies of the swords were already scorched black. The strand of divine sense that was placed in the swords was also shattered by the heavenly thunder. They lost control and fell from the sky. The crowd that was watching the show gasped. If even the flying swords couldn't get past it, how could a human do it? But looking at Yu Qianshou, who was in the center of the lightning zone, that guy was quite bold, but his luck was also quite good. Every time the furious lightning passed by him, it just couldn't hit him. It really was like seeing a ghost. The two Heartless Palace disciples looked at each other. With the flashes of lightning, they could see the sweat on each other's foreheads. Their faces were slightly pale. Could they break in? What was the difference between that and suicide? Gray Cloud Xian's expression was gloomy and gloomy. He could naturally tell that it was too dangerous to force his way in. It would be inexcusable to force his two disciples to go in. He was already cursing in his heart. This bastard's luck was really good. Of all places to hide, he just had to hide in this lightning zone. He felt a little helpless and powerless. Yin Peng had long since arrived at the back of the crowd. When he saw this scene, he couldn't help but be taken aback. He hadn't expected something like this to happen. He wasn't in a hurry to make a move, because Yu Qianshou was hiding in the minefield, and he wasn't very confident that he could enter and exit it freely. "You cowardly tortoise, come out if you have the ability," Tsangyun Xian forcefully roared. Yu Qianshou sneered and said, "Old fart, I'm standing here with an indomitable spirit. Everyone can see that. How can you say I'm a coward? It's obvious that you don't dare to come in, but you're still splashing dirty water on me. Touch your face. Don't you feel ashamed?" Then he suddenly shouted angrily, "Old fart, do you dare to come in and fight me?" As soon as these words came out, the crowd was in an uproar. Gray Cloud Xian was so angry that he was trembling slightly. If he didn't accept the challenge, He wouldn't be able to come out and meet people in the future. A pale golden ball of light suddenly erupted from his body. Protective aura covered his body, and his figure flashed. Without hesitation, he directly entered the minefield. Seeing that he wasn't afraid of the lightning, Yu Qianqiu was slightly shocked and subconsciously prepared to escape. But then he saw that Gray Cloud Xian didn't dare to recklessly barge into the minefield with his protective aura. Instead, he was cautiously approaching. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that this old fart was still afraid. That was good. With a thought, Yu Qianqiu struck down a few heavenly lightning roaring roars, but Gray Cloud Xian nimbly dodged them all. Yu Qianqiu was shocked once more when he saw She getting closer and closer. If a fellow with such a cultivation were to close the distance between them, then every single move she made might take his life. As soon as he became nervous, the thunderbolts in the sky also became tense. Suddenly, like a series of cannons, they struck randomly in the sky, almost cutting off Gray Cloud Xian's space to dodge. Everyone stared unblinkingly at this terrifying scene. However, Gray Cloud Xian was indeed worthy of being the chief high priest of Heartless Palace. In a situation where he could not dodge, he brazenly raised the defense of his Great Dipper energy to the limit. The pale golden protective aura on his body immediately became overflowing with flowing light, like a bright pearl in the dark sky. Several heavenly lightning roaring roars struck the protective aura, but it only made him tremble slightly. He actually forcefully withstood it with his great cultivation. Oomph, that's all you've got. Gray Cloud Xian stared at Yu Qianqiu and sneered. Let's see where you can run today. Facing the dozens of thunderbolts, he didn't even dodge. With a whoosh, he forcibly rushed toward Yu Qianqiu. Damn it, you're awesome. Yu Qianqiu was so frightened that he trembled. He immediately clenched his fists. The dark clouds in the sky immediately flashed with lightning and thunder, illuminating the sky and earth in a vast expanse of white. It seemed that Gray Cloud Xian's arrogant words had completely angered him. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. There seemed to be countless thunderous hands reaching out from the dark clouds and grabbing towards Songyun Xian. Immediately, someone said in astonishment, Songyun Xian's words have offended the heavens. Gray Cloud Xian, who was rushing forward quickly, was instantly frightened. He immediately used all his cultivation to resist the heavenly tribulation. Now, how could he still have the mood to chase after Yu Qianqiu? Bam, 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 bam. Hundreds and thousands of explosions blasted on Gray Cloud Xian's aura shield. His whole body was as dazzling as if he was hiding in an incandescent light bulb, causing him to rapidly sink down from the sky. The dense, thunderous explosions made everyone's ears go numb. However, Gray Cloud Xian was really not an ordinary kind of valiant. Under such a dense bombardment of thunderbolts, his aura shield could actually resist and not be shattered by the heavenly thunder. F*CK. Even this old pervert can't kill you? Yu Qianqiu looked up into the sky. In the dark clouds, the electric snakes from all directions shuttled and gathered, entangling into a super-large thunderbolt with a diameter of 5 or 6 meters. It suddenly struck down as if it wanted to poke a big hole in the ground. Boom! An earth-shattering sound rang out, as if space itself was about to be torn apart. The incomparably majestic energy pillar accurately bombarded the protective aura shield below, which was overflowing with golden light. Almost at the same time, an angry roar that was condensed from countless years of cultivation suddenly burst out, overshadowing the earth-shattering noise. Absolute heaven, absolute earth, absolute emotion, 3 swords as one, sword-drawing style. A hysterical roar, an explosion of endless potential. Everything reverberated between heaven and earth in this one sentence. This was a roar that fought against death and fate. The golden aura shield suddenly shrank back into Gray Cloud Xian's body. Everyone's eyes were focused on it. Yunpeng's pupils suddenly shrank to the size of a needle's eye, filled with disbelief. Just as the thunderbolt was about to strike Tsien Exen, a dazzling sword light was pulled out of his sleeve. The green-white sword light that was pulled out was even more dazzling than the huge thunderbolt that came crashing down from the sky. Its sharp tip pointed straight to the sky and suddenly expanded into a huge sword. Like a heavenly sword, it was about to pierce through the dark sky. Boom! Gray Cloud Xin held the huge sword in his hand and soared into the sky like a dragon. His aura erupted to an unprecedented peak as he directly pulled out his sword and smashed the huge thunderbolt sword that came crashing down. His cultivation had broken through the shackles at the most critical moment when his life was on the line, reaching a whole new realm. Bang! The two peerlessly powerful energies collided, exploded, and spread out. The space shook violently, and the powerful shock wave was like the explosion of a nuclear weapon, rushing out in all directions with an unstoppable momentum. The dark clouds that filled the sky with lightning and thunder were scattered by such a powerful shock wave. The blue sky appeared like a rapidly inflated balloon, and the golden sunlight quickly shone down from the spreading gap, forming a spectacular and enchanting spectacle. Puffed! Gray Cloud Xine suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and fell straight to the ground below. He knelt on one knee and used his sword as a pillar. He buried his head and panted. Under his messy hair, a long line of blood dripped down from the corner of his mouth. Heartless Palace's 3 swords as one, sword-drawing style. The crowd that was watching the show burst into exclamations. Everyone turned around and fled under the pursuit of the huge shockwave. Oh my God, was he still human? This was like the explosion of a nuclear weapon. Yu Qianqiu was scared out of his wits. There was a trail of blood on his lips, and he looked at the shock wave in disbelief. Almost at the same time as the shock wave exploded, a loud and resounding cry rang out. The cloud rock brazenly revealed its true form. It spread its jade-white wings and spun like a shuttle. It drew a dazzling white light and directly rushed towards a shockwave, brazenly traversing the majestic shockwave. Just as Yu Qianqiu came to his senses and was about to flee back to Utopia in fear, he suddenly saw the cloud rock pouncing over in its true form, wrapping its 2 large claws around him. After grabbing Yu Qianqiu, the cloud rock spread its wings again and soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it soared into the sky and narrowly avoided the shock wave below. A pair of large golden eyes stared down below. Gray Cloud Xin, who was on the ground, was also looking up at him with his head raised. The cloud rock did not stay any longer. It carried Yu Qianqiu and quickly flew towards the illusory, immortal city. Cloud rock, you can protect him now, but you can't protect him forever. Gray Cloud Xion's angry roar resounded through the heavens and earth. He knew that he could not catch up to the cloud rock. Moreover, he was injured, so he could only roar to vent his anger. Within the illusory immortal city, almost all the people from the various sects flew into the sky, including the people from the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. An earth-shattering sound came from afar, and it indeed shocked everyone. This kind of commotion could only be caused by a battle between immortal emperors. A white stream of light flew towards the World Commerce Alliance at an unbelievable speed. The experts of the various sects in the illusory immortal city immediately saw that it was the cloud rock flying in its true form. Everyone had more or less received the news that Gray Cloud Xin had gone to chase after Yu Qianqiu. Now that they saw the cloud rock flying in its true form, coupled with the commotion just now, everyone had reason to suspect that the cloud rock and Gray Cloud Xin were fighting. The great bright wheel, which was floating in the sky, frowned and shot towards the World Commerce Alliance in a flash. Chapter 9:32. Yu Qianqiu's body flashed and landed on the rooftop of the World Commerce Association. Yin Peng quickly returned to his original form and landed as well. Both of them didn't look too good, especially Yu Qianqiu, whose mouth was still stained with blood. Wei Chunxiu quickly sized up the two and heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that there was nothing wrong with them. He had also been alarmed by the huge commotion in the distance. At this moment, Deming Luan flashed over and looked at Yun Peng and Yu Qianqiu. He said in a low voice, "Yun Peng, did you fight with Songyun, Xian?" Yun Peng shook his head with a grave expression. "Fuck, that old bastard is really abnormal. Is he interested in me pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? He actually hit a big killer move." Yu Qianqiu spat out a mouthful of bloody saliva and cursed as he wiped the blood off his mouth. Although Songyun Xian's earth-shattering attack didn't directly affect him, he was injured by the momentum that shook the heaven and earth. It would have been better if he hadn't spoken, but as soon as he did, Wei Chunxiu's anger flared up and he yelled at him, "Kid, there's something wrong with your brain. You knew that guy was waiting for a chance to deal with you, but you still dared to run out of hallucinatory Immortal City. You're courting death. It doesn't matter if you die, but don't drag others down with you." Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth, but shut it in the end. He wanted to lure Songyun Xian out by relying on his ability to control the heavenly lightning. Who knew that Songyun Xian was indeed an expert at the Immortal Emperor stage? His cultivation was simply too powerful. He wasn't someone that Mo Wuji could deal with. He finally understood that with his early minor immortal cultivation, it was better to avoid provoking Immortal Emperor experts in the future. Deming Luan looked suspiciously at Yu Qianqiu and asked Yun Peng, "Such a big commotion. If it wasn't you fighting Songyun Xian, could it be him? Or could it be someone else?" Yun Peng was stunned by the question. He thought about it carefully and really didn't know who Songyun Xian was fighting. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and remained silent. Wei Chunxiu scratched his head and said, "Is there something you can't tell us?" Yun Peng shook his head and said, "This is really unimaginable. I don't know who he is fighting with, but Songyun Xian's potential exploded at the critical moment. He actually broke through to the intermediate stage of the Immortal Emperor stage in one go and comprehended the Heartless Palace's 3 swords as one sword drawing style in one go. It was precisely because of the formidable power of the 3-in-1 sword drawing stance that he was able to survive. Otherwise, he would have definitely died this time. Heartless Palace's 3-in-1 sword drawing style. Great Bright Wheel and Wei Chunxiu exclaimed at the same time, their faces filled with disbelief. "Not bad." Yun Peng nodded slowly and said, "Absolute heaven, absolute earth, absolute emotion, 3 swords as one sword drawing technique." After a moment of silence, Wei Chunxiu let out a sigh of relief and exclaimed, "This is really unexpected. Songyun Xian actually comprehended the 3-in-1 sword drawing stance. The Heartless Palace's position as the #1 sect in the celestial world is becoming more and more stable." Seeing the 3 early-stage Immortal Emperor experts exclaim repeatedly, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but ask, could it be that this sword-drawing stance is very famous in the celestial world? Wei Chunxiu subconsciously replied and sighed. The Heartless Palace's sword-drawing stance is famous in the celestial world. It is the Heartless Palace's ultimate technique. The Heartless Palace relied on this technique to secure their position as the #1 sect in the celestial world. The sword-drawing style has 1 absolute heaven, 2 absolute earth, and 3 heartless. Most of the Heartless Palace's disciples would find it extremely difficult to master the first sword, let alone the last 2. It's even more difficult to fuse the 2 sword styles into 1 sword drawing style. In that case, isn't Songyun Xian's 3-in-1 sword drawing stance the strongest sword drawing stance of the Heartless Palace? Yu Qianqiu asked. Yes, Wei Chunxiu said in amazement. Before this, only the sect leader of the Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, could fuse 3 swords into 1 sword drawing stance. It is said that Wang Qing was a very handsome man, but in order to sever his emotions and desires to fuse 3 swords into 1 sword drawing stance, he killed his wife and children and killed his entire family. In the end, he didn't stop and didn't even let himself off. He actually destroyed his own face. In the end, his hard work paid off, and he really mastered the 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance. Because of this, most of the other sects in the celestial world became family sections. Only the Heartless Palace is an exception. Deming Lun nodded slightly. Looking at the past and present, those peerless experts have a mind that is hard to reach. Very few of them would drag their families down with them. These words made Yu Qianqiu sigh. He first thought of his master. Bai Changchun was the same. He pursued the peak of cultivation and didn't care about his family. Yu Qianqiu thought of himself and couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. Suddenly, Yin Peng thought about it and interrupted. If I'm not wrong, Xian Xen should be thankful for what happened today. If he wasn't forced into a desperate situation, it would be very difficult for him to break through this shackle and instantly comprehend the 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance of the Heartless Palace. I have to say that it's fate. It can be considered as luck. Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. He gulped with difficulty and said, "You mean that the reason Sanyan Xian was able to comprehend the 3-in-1 sword-drawing style was because he was forced to do so by that bolt of lightning? That's just my guess, but I'm pretty sure that's the case." Yin Peng glanced at him and said, "Otherwise, based on the fact that you killed his only grandson, he wouldn't have bothered talking to you in that situation. Once he used the 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance, you have been dead. Why did he have to suffer so much and only draw his sword in the end?" Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. In that case, he had helped Sanyan Xian greatly by not killing him with the heavenly lightning. This matter was Motherf *Ker. When Yu Qianqiu thought about how Sanyan Xian would use that frightening 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance to deal with him in the future, his scalp went numb. One thing was certain. Sanyan Xian would definitely not let him go. He coughed and asked, "Is there any way to defend or break this 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance of the Heartless Palace?" The three of them looked at him together and guessed his concerns. Wei Chunqiu sneered and said, "You want to defend and break it? With your abilities? Let me tell you, try your best to avoid him in the future. Not meeting him is the best way to save your life." Deming nodded and explained, "Those who have cultivated the 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance in the Heartless Palace will carry a few swords that they won't use easily. Absolute Heaven, Absolute Earth, Absolute Emotion, 2-in-1 sword-drawing stance, and 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance basically have a matching sword. Those who have cultivated all 5 sword-drawing stances will usually carry 5 swords that they won't use easily. These 5 swords represent the peak sword intents of the user's 5 types and cultivation. It's fine if they're not drawn, but once they're drawn, they'll be earth-shattering. Each sword is stronger than the last, especially the 5th sword that represents the 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance. Very few people in the 3 realms can block this move." Yu Qianqiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard this. Very few people in the 3 realms can block this move. Deming nodded and then added, "After the Heartless Palace's sect master, Wang Qing, mastered the 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance. Other than that time when he was defeated by the Immortal Emperor, he has never had an opponent. It's probably very difficult for anyone in the 13 great immortal monarchs to be able to block Wang Qing's 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance. Of course, Sanyan Xian has just mastered it, so there's definitely a big gap between him and Wang Qing. However, at least the 3 of us can't block Sanyan Xian's 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance. As for you, there's no need to talk about it." He changed the topic and ignored Yu Qianqiu. He turned to Yin Peng and asked, "What happened just now?" Wei Chunqiu also looked at him curiously. Yin Peng was silent for a while. Then he told them what happened when the thunderbolts attacked Sanyan Xian. After listening to him, Deming and Wei Chunqiu felt that it was a little unbelievable. They had never heard of such a strange thing. They couldn't help but look at Yu Qianqiu in confusion, as if they were asking, "Why did the lightning only target Sanyan Xian, but nothing happened to you at all?" Yu Qianqiu hurriedly shook his head and said, "I don't know what happened either, but there's one thing I'm sure of. Sanyan Xian's rude words angered the heavens, and in the end, he was punished by thunderbolts. Many people saw this with their own eyes. Ming Luan and Wei Chunxiu looked at Yun Peng in unison. They didn't quite believe this explanation. Yun Peng was speechless. At that time, Sanyan Xian did say to the thunderbolts in the sky that it was only SOSO, but was that really the reason? That was a little too mysterious. Seeing that he couldn't get an answer, Ming Luan didn't want to stay any longer. After all, because of his identity, he couldn't stay for long, so he immediately said goodbye to them and left. Apart from Yun Peng on the rooftop, the other two went down to the 22nd floor. In the corridor, Wei Chunxiu suddenly asked sneakily via voice transmission, "Yu Qianqiu, tell me honestly, are you related to the heavenly lightning targeting Sangyun Xian?" Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, "Why would you have such an idea? Do you think I can control the heavenly lightning?" He did not directly say that he couldn't control it and let the other party think about it himself. Wei Chunxiu frowned and thought about it, but she also felt that it was unlikely. After the two of them split up, Yu Qianqiu returned to Utopia. He first looked for Zhang Peng to ask about the progress of the pill refinement. Chen Feng did not delay, but after all, he had limited manpower and the speed of the refinement was indeed not satisfactory. He paced back and forth in the military camp's conference room for a while before disappearing. In China, the headquarters of the Hong Gang and the Qing Gang were still under the big tree in front of the flat ground halfway up the mountain behind the mountain god temple. Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun were summoned together. Yu Qianqiu looked at the mountain god temple with green smoke curling up from the foot of the mountain. He reached out to touch the rough bark of the big tree and slowly said, "Gu Qingyun, immediately send a group of people overseas to search for the volcanic island. Hong Qi, send someone to pass on my order. Gather all the cultivators in the world who know how to refine pills and gather in the East Holy Land." Chapter 9:33. Gu Qingyun, on the other hand, had no objections and immediately accepted the order. However, Hong Qi was somewhat hesitant. "Master, you just told me this matter before. I still haven't figured out the situation. I'm afraid it will be difficult to gather all the cultivators in the world who can refine pills in a short period of time. Why don't you give me some time first? There's no time for you to slowly prepare." Yu Qianqiu turned around, looked at him, and said slowly, "Directly order the recruitment to the entire cultivation world. If anyone is found to be avoiding the recruitment, kill without mercy. There's no need to play cat and mouse with them at this time. Whoever wants to play can die." "Understood." Hong Qi cupped his hands in response. After Yu Qianqiu explained the matter clearly, he did not stay any longer and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Within the ruins of God, Yu Qianqiu appeared in the small valley where he had saved Shui Mingqing. His trip this time was to scout the way and prepare for the subsequent actions. The valley was still the same valley. Nothing had changed. Yu Qianqiu carefully looked around. There were only some short old branches that had grown for who knew how many years, looking somewhat sinister in the mist, but he did not find any danger. The surroundings were very quiet. He immediately flew to the top of the mountain and looked around. Just like before, the world was still covered in white, and his vision could not see far away. Whoosh! Yu Qianqiu's body turned into a stream of light and quickly flew away. With the valley as the center, he flew close to the ground and circled around. Occasionally, he could see some strange and abnormally timid animals that were scared away by him. After walking around, he felt that there was no danger and finally felt a lot more at ease. He then changed his direction and flew towards the direction of the thick fog wall that connected the heavens and the earth. Now that his cultivation had stepped into the immortal stage, he felt that he had some ability to protect himself. He wanted to see what was hidden behind the fog wall. With his current flying speed, it didn't take him half a day to stop in front of the fog wall that connected the heavens and the earth. Thinking back to the scene of several experts from the Immortal Palace joining hands to kill a giant snake, he was somewhat hesitant to go in. After hesitating for a while, he clenched his teeth and rushed in. However, his flying speed had already slowed down. He released his divine sense to investigate the surroundings as he slowly advanced forward. Who would have thought that after spending half a day he still wouldn't be able to break through the thick fog that was so thick that he couldn't even see his own fingers in front of him. This made him even more cautious. One must know that the more unknown a place was, the easier it was for one's nerves to be on edge. At first, he did not notice anything unusual in the thick fog, but as he went deeper and deeper, he began to hear the occasional dull sound of something being crushed. There was also the sound of heavy breathing that sounded like bellows, as if some huge animal was walking below. Just as Yuchincho was about to use his divine sense to check what it was, he suddenly discovered that his body, which was moving forward, had come to a halt. After struggling for a moment, he felt as though he had slammed into a large net, and his whole body seemed to have been entangled in the net. F***CK. Did someone set a trap here? Yuchincho was shocked. He had been using his divine sense to explore the way. How could there be such a large net lying in front of him without him noticing it? His head approached the place where his body and limbs were entangled, and he immediately found that he was not entangled in a net, but was stuck by a rope net that was as thick as a child's arm. The strange thing was that this rope net was crystal clear and covered with mucus. When his divine sense swept over it, it actually passed through the air as if it was nothing. F***CK. What the hell is this? Yuchincho quickly released his divine sense to investigate, and found that he had actually broken into a canyon. This net seemed to be deliberately set up in the canyon to wait for him. Yuchincho struggled hard, but found that the stickiness of this thing was difficult to estimate. Even with his cultivation, he couldn't get rid of it. Then, a feeling of numbness began to spread from his skin that was stuck, and the clothes that were stuck on his body began to emit black smoke and rot. Needless to say, this transparent rope net was highly toxic, otherwise it would not be able to corrode his immortal body that he had forged. After a moment of surprise, he suddenly felt a tremor from both ends of the transparent giant rope net. It seemed as though something was quickly climbing over from both ends of the rope net, and was quickly approaching him. Moreover, there was also a heart-palpitating zhi-zhi sound coming from it. It felt as though he was the prey, and there were two things fighting to hunt him. Yuchincho didn't dare to hesitate. His whole body emitted a purple flame, and with a sound, he burned a big hole in the middle of the rope net that was stuck to him, and he quickly dodged. He looked at the place where he was stuck just now, but there was a thick fog, and he couldn't see anything. He released his divine sense again to investigate, and found that there were two huge arthropods in the air, and they were quickly converging at the center of the canyon. Wind rise! Yuchincho let out a light shout, and held a ball of purple fire in each of his palms. A gust of wind immediately rose in the canyon, and the thick fog that pervaded the surroundings was quickly dispersed. The dim canyon immediately revealed its true appearance. Yuchincho's eyes gradually widened as he looked ahead, and he seemed to be in disbelief. This was a large canyon that was 100 meters wide and hundreds of meters high. Although the canyon was wide enough, it still gave people a feeling of a thin line of sky when they looked up. On both sides of the dark mountain rocks, there were all kinds of colorful arthropods attached to them. Their bodies were either huge or growing steadily. Not to mention their huge bodies, they were all covered in hard armor. If they curled up and didn't move, just using divine sense to investigate would probably cause people to mistake them for rocks. No wonder when he used his divine sense to investigate the canyon on both sides, he didn't discover them. Following the use of the purple fire energy to create a gust of wind that whistled through the canyon, pairs of tentacles began to extend from the craggy mountain rocks. Disgusting worms that were as large as worms crawled out from all over the place. These pink worms were covered in mucus, expanding their disgusting circular mouths and making shio-shio sounds against the wind, as if they were hungry and wanted to eat. A circle of ferocious fangs constantly opened and retracted inside their circular mouths, and mucus like mucus slid down from their mouths. It was a horrifying sight to behold. At the bottom of the canyon, there were dense white bones everywhere. There was no lack of human bones, but most of them were the corpses of various animals. Some of the bones had already turned yellow and black, and some of them were already covered in a layer of moss. It was obvious that they had existed here for many years. It was unknown how many corpses and bones had accumulated in the canyon over the countless years. Some strange animals climbed on top of the various skeletons, constantly sniffing, as if they wanted to find some scattered meat on the skeletons to fill their stomachs. Yuchincho frowned. He never thought that there would be such a disgusting place in the ruins of God. His gaze then landed on the large net in the middle of the canyon. Although he had burned a large hole in the middle, it did not affect his ability to recognize its full appearance. It was actually a giant spider web. Two big, fluffy, colorful spiders with a body size of 5 to 6 meters crawled to the gap in the broken web. After looking around with their big black eyes, they didn't find any prey. Then, they quickly spat out crystal-clear spider silk that was as thick as a child's arm, quickly repairing the damaged area. Whoosh! A ray of multicolored light flew out from Yuchincho's hand and slashed at the spider web. A strand of spider silk was suddenly stretched out, and then it quickly bounced back. A flying sword was stuck on it, swaying. The two large spiders vigilantly stopped spitting silk and suddenly turned around at the same time. Their huge bodies climbed on the spider web as if they were flying, quickly rushing to the source of the earthquake. The two big fellows probably thought that they had caught their prey. The large spider that was closer naturally had the advantage of being in a favorable position. It was the first to reveal two light golden, curved, sharp teeth that were as long as a child's arm. He quickly clamped onto the flying sword and chewed it happily. With a ding sound, the flying sword was immediately broken into two pieces. It seemed to realize that it was not the food it had imagined, so it turned around and gave up. The flying sword that had been broken into two pieces swayed on the spiderweb. The spider that caught up with it pounced on the flying sword and chewed on it. With a ding, it similarly broke the flying sword into two pieces. It shook its head disinterestedly and turned around to continue mending the spiderweb. Yuchincho, who had his eyes on the spider web and wanted to test its toughness, did not expect to see such a scene. He immediately let out a breath of cold air. The quality of the flying sword was not bad. It was given to him by Hua Yunlong, but he did not expect it to be bitten into two by the spider in just 2 bites. Oh my, what kind of spider is this? Its jaws are so powerful, and the spider silk it spits out is also extraordinarily tough. Even a flying sword can't cut it. Yuchincho mumbled to himself. His eyes gradually brightened. He quickly took out the Jade archive and found the one with the records of the various beasts. In the end, even after going through it a few times, he could not find the original form of the spider in front of him. This made him even more astonished. Logically speaking, such a powerful spider could not possibly be a nobody. Why was there no record of it in this Jade archive? Could it be a new species? He looked at his surroundings. If he had not accidentally stumbled into this place, he probably would not have been able to discover them. He wondered how many years these fellows had lived in this place. Yuchincho looked around and found that there were only 2 of these spiders in the entire valley. His gaze fell on the spider web. He felt that it should be of great use, but he did not know how to collect it. He then looked at the pale, golden jaws of the 2 spiders. He felt that they should be of great use as well. Just as Yuchincho's eyes lit up and a purple flame flying sword materialized, ready to slaughter the 2 spiders and pry out their jaws, he saw that the 2 spiders had already mended the spiderweb. Their heads arched together for a while, then they crawled to the other end of the spiderweb together. Chapter 9:34. As soon as the 2 spiders climbed up the craggy mountain wall, the arthropods and ugly worms around them quickly retreated, as if they were extremely afraid of the 2 spiders. Those that could hide in the cracks on the mountain wall all shrank back. However, the 2 fellows suddenly seemed to have gone mad. Their 4 pairs of slender limbs quickly waved and rushed into the retreating swarm of worms. The 4 pairs of limbs were like the sides of the Grim Reaper, madly waving about and slaughtering. The 8 sharp limbs stabbed in and killed one worm after another. The 2 fellows were like tigers that had entered a flock of sheep, wantonly slaughtering. They didn't know what was wrong with them, but it seemed like they hadn't offended them at all. However, even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered, let alone these evil creatures that lived here. A group of centipede-like, dark red, 1-meter-long, multi-legged reptiles that were much larger than the centipedes launched a frenzied counterattack, engulfing them like a tidal wave. For a moment, all kinds of ear-piercing screeches sounded from the mountain wall. The entire mountain wall was in chaos. Yu Qianqiu put away the purple flame flying sword, but still protected himself with purple flames. He watched the fierce battle between these worms with interest. This kind of scene was rare. He wanted to see if the two spiders could win against these tens of thousands of centipede-like worms. The situation was obvious. Since the two spiders dared to start a war, they were clearly very confident and didn't fear these pseudo-centipedes at all. They waved their 8 sharp limbs and quickly killed their way out of the heavy encirclement. With a casual wave of their limbs, several worms fell to the bottom of the valley. Meanwhile, an animal that looked like a mouse would immediately crawl out from the bottom of the valley and quickly eat the worms that fell. Although the tens of thousands of worms were brave, it seemed like they couldn't bite through the carapace of the two spiders. Just like that, groups of worms were beaten to the bottom of the valley. Not long after, more than half of them were dead or injured. These worms clearly knew that this couldn't go on for long, so they quickly retreated in defeat and fled in all directions. The two large spiders also stopped their chase. Their abdomens each spat out a strand of spider silk towards the rock. With a whoosh, they dropped down to the bottom of the valley. Those animals that looked like mice immediately fled, obviously very afraid of them. As soon as the two large spiders landed on the ground, they immediately waved their 8 large limbs and pierced through the pile of reptile corpses. Not long after, their 8 limbs were filled with reptile corpses like roasted lamb skewers. In the end, the two of them carried a large amount of prey and crawled to a bend at the bottom of the canyon before disappearing. Could it be that there's a nest down there, and they're returning to their nest? Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself. He rubbed his chin and hesitated for a while before he flew towards the bottom of the valley. He went around the corner and found the reason why they had disappeared. There was a cave with a diameter of more than 10 meters on the stone wall. There were many scratches on the entrance of the cave, which were obviously left by the two spiders. At the bottom of the valley, piles of bones piled up and a foul stench wafted out of the cave. Yu Qianqiu listened at the entrance of the cave for a while. In the end, he couldn't help but quietly float in. It couldn't be helped. He had always been too curious. There weren't any obstructions in the cave, and it was very spacious. It was probably because of the spiders going in and out, but the winding passageway was a little too dark. At this time, Yu Qianqiu didn't have the mood to use the purple flames to control the wind outside. The canyon outside the cave was filled with thick fog after a while. After walking along the passageway of the cave for about 1 kilometer, there was a faint phosphorescent light in front of him. Specks of phosphorescent light appeared on the walls of the cave. The deeper he went, the brighter the light became. In the end, he could already see things normally. Suddenly, a creaking sound like metal rubbing against each other came from the end of the cave. From it, one could hear a kind of irritable emotion, which was obviously coming from an animal. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled, and then he sped up and flew over. Not long after, he saw the end of the cave. Before he understood the situation, he didn't dare to expose himself. His whole body quietly entered the cave wall. After passing through the mountain to an advantageous position, he poked a small hole in the wall and squinted his eyes to peek inside. At the end of the cave was a huge space. It was like an inverted spindle in the belly of the mountain. There were many huge stalagmites hanging upside down. In the center of the largest stalagmites, there was a huge spider web with a diameter of several hundred meters. However, there was nothing on it. There was a spider silk hanging down from the spider web. Yu Qianqiu adjusted his vision and followed the spider silk to look at the place where the violent noise was coming from. In the end, he didn't know if he didn't look, but after he got a clear look, he was immediately alarmed. He saw a giant spider about 10 meters in size waving its legs. kicking the reptile corpses that the two spiders had brought over. It was unknown if it was dissatisfied with the food or if it was sick of it. Not only was this giant spider bigger than the two spiders he had seen before, but its body was also light gold in color, especially its 4 pairs of limbs, which were like golden spears. The pair of jaws on its mouth was a mixture of red and gold, and there was a faint glow flowing on them. It was not like the two spiders with colorful and furry bodies. Its carapace was bright and clean. If one did not pay attention, they would almost be mistaken for a crab. At this moment, the Spider King suddenly used its hind legs to prop up its body. Its abdomen was covered with densely packed balls. Each of them was the size of a fist, and there were probably more than 1,000 of them. They were glistening yellow and clean. Suddenly, it used its 2 front legs to pluck a yellow ball from its abdomen and raised it up. Yu Qianqiu could vaguely see the shape of a small spider inside the yellow ball. Needless to say, it was definitely a spider egg. However, what surprised Yu Qianqiu was that the Spider King actually stuffed the spider egg into its mouth and chewed it. It seemed to be eating it with relish, and when one was not enough, it plucked another one and stuffed it into its mouth. Just like that, it ate more than a dozen. It actually ate its own eggs. It really was a heartless beast. Yu Qianqiu's expression could not help but twitch. He was not the only one who could not stand it anymore. The 2 colorful spiders also surrounded the Spider King and let out a sorrowful squeak, as if they wanted to stop the Spider King from doing this. After eating more than a dozen spider eggs, the Spider King was finally satisfied. It propped its upper body up and lay back on the ground. The 2 colorful spiders immediately stabbed the scattered reptile corpses and piled them in front of the Spider King. The Spider King looked a little disinterested as it slowly swallowed the reptile corpses in front of it. It did not seem to be to its liking. After eating, it waved its front legs impatiently and chased the 2 big spiders away. Then, the Spider King turned around and pulled on the spider's silk hanging in the air, slowly climbing up the spider web. Just as it was about to climb to the top of the spider web, its careless gaze suddenly paused, and its huge body also stopped moving in the air. Its gaze found a small hole in the mountain wall, and its gaze met with the gaze of the person inside. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He seemed to see a trace of a smile in the other's eyes. The spider is smiling at me? Then he thought to himself, oh no, he had been discovered. He did not know if the Spider King was strong or if he could handle it. But when he thought that he could escape at any time, he calmed down and looked outside. Then, he was stunned again. He saw that a huge silhouette had disappeared from the spider web. Instead, a net bed had appeared on the spider web, and a beautiful woman in flowery clothes was lying on it. She was looking at him with a smile. It's been a long time since I had a guest in my cave abode. I wonder which esteemed guest has arrived. Why don't you come out and meet me? The woman in flowery clothes said with a smile. Damn, this savage beast could already assume human form. Yu Qianqiu checked the other party's cultivation and found that she was only at the early stage minor immortal stage, about the same as him. Immediately, he felt more at ease. The wall in front of him melted away, and Yu Qianqiu walked in openly. You are human? The woman in flowery clothes who was lying on her side sat up from the net bed in surprise. Then, she floated down and circled around Yu Qianqiu to size him up. There was a look of disbelief on her face. Of course I am human. This question made Yu Qianqiu feel depressed. However, from the other party's point of view, they were not the same kind, so it was understandable for her to ask such a question. Yu Qianqiu remained vigilant as he sized up the other party. The woman in flowery clothes had a fair and clean face. Her appearance was also very beautiful, and she had the temperament of a noble lady. However, the most conspicuous thing was her belly, which was bulging and looked like she was about to give birth after 10 months of pregnancy. However, when he thought of the scene of her eating his child, Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt nauseous. After circling a few times, the woman in flowery clothes rubbed her big belly with both hands and stopped in front of Yu Qianqiu. She frowned and said, "That's strange. How can a human enter the divine ruin realm now? Logically speaking, it should be 100 years later. Could it be that you didn't get out in time when the Divine Ruin Realm closed last time? Yu Qianqiu made a non-committal sound. The woman in flowery clothes immediately clicked her tongue in surprise and said, "So you have some ability. Otherwise, how could you have survived until now with your early-stage minor immortal cultivation? I wonder why you call me out?" Yu Qianqiu asked indifferently. "Yo." The woman in flowery clothes felt that it was somewhat inconceivable and said, "You trespassed into my cave abode, and now you're in the right. If there's nothing else, I won't accompany you. Goodbye." Yu Qianqiu flashed and flew out of the cave, too lazy to pay attention to her. "Stop. Do you think my place is a place where you can come and go as you please?" The woman in flowery clothes immediately sneered and said, "I haven't eaten human flesh for a long time. It's a good change of taste." Then she spread her arms, and a white light flashed out from her sleeves. A dense spider web instantly spread out and covered most of the cave abode, trapping Yu Qianqiu inside. The woman in flowery clothes pulled the other end of the rope net and sneered, "Now that you've fallen into my net, let's see where you can escape." Just as she was about to pull Yu Qianqiu over, she saw that his body suddenly emitted a purple flame, burning the rope net that trapped him into ashes on the spot. Chapter 9:35. "Stop! Do you think this is a place where you can come and go as you please?" The woman immediately sneered, "I haven't eaten human flesh for a long time. It's time for a change of taste." Then, he spread his arms, and a white light quickly flashed out from his sleeves. A dense spider web instantly spread out and enveloped most of the cave, trapping Yu Qianqiu on the spot. The woman pulled the other end of the rope net and sneered, "Now that you've fallen into my net, let's see where you can escape." Just as he was about to drag Yu Qianqiu over, he saw a purple flame suddenly erupt from the other party's body, burning the rope net that trapped him to ashes on the spot. Purple flame. The woman cried out involuntarily. Her spider clan was most afraid of fire, especially the spider silk that spider spit out. Raging fire was the natural nemesis of spider silk, and it would usually burn when it encountered fire. Of course, for a spider demon like her, ordinary raging fire naturally couldn't do anything to her, but now she saw the purple flame of the supreme flame. How could she not be afraid when her nemesis was in front of her? Even in her dreams, she had never thought that she would meet someone who could control the purple flame when she acted rashly. Yu Qianqiu floated in the air, his whole body burning with purple flames. He slowly turned around and stared at her coldly. "Although you're a spider demon, I've never killed a pregnant woman. I originally wanted to spare your life, but who knew that you wouldn't know what's good for you? You're courting death, don't blame me." Feeling the pressure of the purple flame, the woman's limbs immediately became weak. Her expression was somewhat bitter as she cupped her hands and said, "Your Excellency, I've been presumptuous. Please, for the sake of the child in my stomach, temporarily stop and listen to my explanation." "For the sake of the child in your stomach? How dare you say such words?" Yu Qianqiu immediately flew into a rage and said, "Do you think I didn't see what you ate earlier? I know what you saw, but there's something you don't know." The woman smiled bitterly. "Even if I don't eat them, they won't be able to survive. I can't explain this to you in a short time, and you don't have the patience to listen to me slowly. I just want to tell you that I'm the only female spider left among the temple rainbow spiders. If I die, my race will be in danger of going extinct. I hope your Excellency can show mercy." Once Yu Qianqiu became angry, he was definitely a ruthless person. But after hearing her words, he couldn't help but ask, "Temple rainbow spider? What temple? If it wasn't for the child in my stomach, I wouldn't be easily threatened even though you have the purple flames." The flowery, clothed woman first confessed, then explained, "This divine ruin realm was originally created by the Phoenix god, and there is a Phoenix temple in the divine ruin realm. The ancestors of our rainbow spider were originally spiders who cultivated under the eaves of the temple. Later on, for some unknown reason, the Phoenix god expelled all the living beings from the temple and sealed the Phoenix temple. Since then, The Divine Ruins realm has never seen the figure of the Phoenix God again. After countless years, due to various reasons, our rainbow spider race has been declining day by day, and I'm the only female spider left. So I hope that your excellency can show mercy. Phoenix God? Phoenix. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled and could not help but think of the crow on Wu Lishue's shoulder that claimed to be a phoenix. He paused for a moment and said, "You mean there's a sealed temple called the Phoenix Temple in the Divine Ruins realm?" "Exactly." The flowery, clothed woman nodded. She could already feel that the killing intent on Yu Qianqiu's body had subsided and could not help but heave a sigh of relief. "Temple? I wonder what's in the temple." Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. "Where is the temple located in the Divine Ruins realm? As long as you tell me, I can spare your life." "I don't want to lie to you." The flowery, clothed woman muttered to herself. "I've only heard the story of the Phoenix God sealing the temple. As for where the temple is sealed in the Divine Ruins realm, I don't think anyone can find it." Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Saying so much is equivalent to not saying anything. You're not lying to me, are you? There are many dangerous places in the Divine Ruins realm. If I really wanted to lie to you, I could have casually pointed out a dangerous place for you to die. Why would I need to do this?" The flowery, clothed woman replied. After going around in a circle, it was equivalent to saying nothing. Yu Qianqiu's gaze was slightly cold, and the killing intent in his heart rose again. He wanted to strip the spider demon of anything useful, but looking at her protruding stomach, he did not harden his heart to make a move. It would have been fine if she was in her spider form, but she had transformed into a pregnant woman in human form. "My name is Yu Qianqiu. What's your name?" Yu Qianqiu coughed and asked. When the flowery, clothed woman saw him ask such a question, she knew that the possibility of making a move was not high. The danger had passed, so she replied with a smile, "My name is Kai Feng." Yu Qianqiu looked at her smiling face, which was like a flower. She did not look like the spider demon that had just devoured his child. He could not help but feel a little depressed, wondering if he was too soft-hearted. He frowned and said, "Kai Feng, let me ask you, why is the Divine Ruins realm always covered in fog?" Kai Feng was startled, then suddenly smiled sweetly and said, "The fog is only within a certain distance from the exit of the Divine Ruins realm. After passing through the canyon outside, you will naturally not be able to see the white fog that does not dissipate all year round." Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to ask more, but he suddenly received a summons from Zhang Peng in Utopia. It seemed that the things he had asked Zhang Peng to prepare before coming to the Divine Ruins realm had already been prepared. After thinking for a while, he thought that it would not be long before he returned. So he said to Kai Feng, "I have something to do, so I'll take my leave for now. I'll disturb you another day." "Anytime." Kai Feng smiled and watched as Yu Qianqiu turned into a stream of light and flashed out of the cave. On a remote island, Zhang Peng had already brought a large amount of immortal herbs to wait for him. There was no other reason than the quality of the immortal pills refined by Chen Feng, and the others was far inferior to the ones refined by him. He was afraid that something would happen to the Utopia army after consuming them. After all, they were his direct subordinates, so he decided to personally refine a batch for the Utopia army. On the island, Zhang Peng used the earth mantra to clear a large piece of hard and flat land. Yu Qianqiu stood in the middle, his palms burning with a light green pillar of fire that was 1,000 feet tall. Zhang Peng circled and danced around the light green pillar of fire. He wore a storage bracelet that his master had given him on each of his wrists, and he kept throwing immortal herbs from the storage bracelet into the rising and burning light green pillar of fire. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and calmly refined the immortal pills. In the fire pillars supported by his palms, 200 layers of pills were being refined at the same time. This scene of pill refinement shocked Zhang Peng. This was equivalent to a person refining 400 cauldrons of pills at the same time. One person was equivalent to 400 alchemy experts. Yu Qianqiu did not need to worry about the rest. He only needed to focus on refining, and Zhang Peng would handle the rest. Zhang Peng continued to fly around the pillar of fire. Whenever an immortal pill popped out from a certain level, he would immediately rush over to collect it into his storage bracelet. Then, he would take out an immortal herb from another storage bracelet and place it into the empty space. Master and disciple worked together without any distractions. Furnace after furnace of immortal pills were produced almost continuously, and the refining efficiency was very high. Half a month later, 50,000 restriction-breaking pills, 10,000 marrow-cleansing pills, and 10,000 immortal ascension pills were refined. After continuously refining for half a month, both master and disciple were somewhat exhausted. Zhang Peng held the storage bracelet filled with immortal pills and offered it to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "I won't be personally handling this matter. Just as I instructed, you will be in charge. Gather the army and get everyone to bring everything that can be used or taken away from the camp. Then bring them here." Having said that, he looked around and continued, "Let everyone forge their immortal physiques in one go. After this, I will take everyone to another place for a period of training so that the army's strength can be improved as soon as possible." Zhang Peng paused and asked, "Should we inform Mistress and the others to come as well?" "There's no need." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "Just gather the army, don't inform the others. We're just going to train, it's not like we won't come back. This is our rear, we're just leaving for a while." "Understood." Zhang Peng cupped his hands and flew away. Yu Qianqiu sat cross-legged on the ground to recover his spirit. After recovering, he flew to the main peak of the island and hid there, waiting for Zhang Peng to bring the army. He did this because there were some things that he couldn't let too many people know for now. In less than a day, Zhang Peng had brought nearly 10,000 well-prepared people to the island. In reality, there were only about 9,000 people in total. Zhang Peng had been briefed beforehand, so he knew what to do. He distributed the refined pills according to the number of people. All of the team members were well-trained and obedient. No one would be long-winded. After Zhang Peng explained everything clearly, he gave the order, and everyone immediately followed the steps unconditionally. More than 9,000 people sat cross-legged in a formation and began to consume pills to increase their cultivation levels. The painful process was naturally the same as that of the soldier in Utopia's conference room. Almost 10,000 people endured it step by step until they consumed immortal ascension pills to increase their cultivation levels to the immortal realm. No matter how disciplined they were, they couldn't help but feel excited. As Zhang Peng had to take charge of the situation, he didn't consume pills to increase his cultivation level. When he saw that everyone had achieved their goal, he couldn't help but look around in excitement. He couldn't help but doubt his master's words about using the heavenly lightning to forge an immortal body. The sky was clear and sunny. How could there be the possibility of heavenly lightning descending? Almost 10,000 people who were told about the process of forging an immortal body also looked around, deeply doubting whether there would be heavenly lightning descending. Just as everyone was feeling puzzled, a strong gust of wind blew, and the sea outside the island suddenly became turbulent. In the blink of an eye, the world turned dark. Dark clouds started to gather in the sky above. Following a thunderous explosion in the sky, electric snakes flashed through the clouds. Chapter 9:36. Not long after, the island had already turned dark. Only the flashes of lightning illuminated the tens of thousands of dumbfounded men sitting cross-legged on the ground, naked from head to toe. Rumble! The rolling lightning reverberated in the dark clouds. Enough energy had been accumulated. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding on a mountain peak, looked down from the sky and transmitted his voice, "Zhang Peng, tell them to get ready." Zhang Peng immediately came back to his senses. He looked at the tens of thousands of team members sitting cross-legged in front of him, raised his right arm and shouted, "Get ready." As soon as he gave the order, everyone immediately focused and closed their eyes. At this moment, countless lightning snakes crackled and tangled in the dark clouds above. Zhang Peng raised his head, and his vision blurred. He saw tens of thousands of bright lightning bolts coming down with a swoosh, and they corresponded to each team member's body. Tens of thousands of dazzling green and white lightning bolts connected the sky and the earth, twisting and twisting in the air. One end was tied to the dark clouds, and the other end was tied to each team member's body. It was as if countless heavenly ropes were thrown down from the sky. It was a spectacular sight. At first, the team members trembled, but when they realized that the destructive power of the lightning was controlled just right, they all calmed down and focused on using the miraculous reaction between the lightning and celestial core power to slowly improve their physical bodies. Dazzling green and white circles of lightning could be seen moving up and down their bodies. Zhang Peng looked at the spectacular scene in front of him, and his heart was filled with emotion. He admired his master's miraculous methods. He didn't expect his master to be able to summon the sky, full of lightning, and control it in the palm of his hand. The weight of Yu Qianqiu in his heart became heavier, and he became more and more respectful. Just as he was feeling emotional, he suddenly realized that there was one more person beside him. It was none other than Hong Qi. The smile on Hong Qi's face froze, and his eyes were filled with disbelief as he looked at the spectacular scene in front of him. Zhang Peng, I'll watch over here. You guys can start too. Yu Qianqiu's voice rang in their ears, and the two of them did not dare to hesitate and immediately started to carry out his orders. Zhang Peng gave the required pills to Hong Qi, and the two of them sat cross-legged in front of the crowd, swallowed the pills, and circulated them. After the two were baptized by the lightning and forged their immortal physiques, they opened their eyes and saw nearly 10,000 eyes full of joy. Obviously, they had forged their immortal physiques before them. However, he was still sitting cross-legged on the ground naked like the two of them. Before receiving any orders, they had been sitting there waiting. This was the result of years of training. The dark clouds in the sky began to dissipate, revealing the clear blue sky once again. Yu Qianqiu, who was at the peak of the mountain, looked down with satisfaction. This was a truly powerful army. This was the kind of army he wanted. As an army, they could think of ways to make up for the lack of cultivation, but if they lost their essence, qi, and spirit, then there was no need to nurture them. Stand up, dress up. Following Zhang Peng's command, nearly 10,000 people stood up in unison. They quickly picked up the storage pouches on the ground, took out their clothes, and put them on. After putting on their clothes, they stood still like javelins. This scene made Hong Qi very envious. Although this army did not have as many people as his Hong gang, they were much stronger than the motley crew that was restricted by the gang rules. Close to 10,000 people, all of them at the immortal realm, and all of them were obedient, not afraid of sacrificing themselves. They would attack wherever they were pointed. Hong Qi looked around the crowd a few times, but he didn't see Guan Yu. He immediately understood that his master had already used the method of boiling a frog in warm water to slowly pass the command of this army to his junior brother Zhang Peng. It was obvious that the people his master trusted the most were still the two of them. While he felt proud, he could not help but smack his lips and look at Zhang Peng with great envy. Although he had a lot more freedom outside, if his master agreed, he would not hesitate to change positions with Zhang Peng. This was because it was too tiring to fight with people outside every day, and it was not as satisfying as leading this army. However, he also knew that in terms of leading troops to war, he could not compare to Zhang Peng, who was a fierce general who had been through many battles in the human world. This was also the main reason why his master had handed Utopia's army to Zhang Peng. If his junior brother, Zhang Peng, did not have the ability, even if he was his master's disciple, his master would not have handed this army to him. There was no doubt about this. On the flat ground at the foot of the mountain, aside from Hong Qi, everyone else, starting from Zhang Peng, stood there with their heads high and chests puffed out, not moving at all. Yu Qianqiu walked out from his hiding spot at the top of the mountain. He sat on a rock and looked at the army below silently, feeling very emotional. This elite army had been forged with years of blood, sweat, and tears. It was also accumulated bit by bit over time, and they already had a highly unified army soul with a will as strong as steel. Even if one of them died in this army, it would be a huge loss. However, the value of an army's existence was war and killing, but there would always be sacrifices in war and killing, which meant that the army would continue to lose members. Moreover, with their strength, the human world had already lost the right to be their battlefield. Their battlefield would be at a higher level in the near future, like the Celestial Realm or the Netherworld. However, compared to the Celestial Realm and the Netherworld, their strength was too weak, which meant that they would have to sacrifice even more. Yu Qianzhou's gaze was cast to the depths of the sea at some point in time. After some thought, he suddenly stood up and looked down with a determined gaze. He thought to himself, "I'll do my best to increase your cultivation level and give you the best equipment so that you can face the cruelest baptism of war. I'll turn you into my iron-blooded trump cards." With a flash, Yu Qianzhou suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Previously, he didn't want everyone to know that he was related to the lightning that filled the sky just now. But after some observation, he had full confidence in this army. This was an army that was worthy of his trust. Yu Qianzhou's sudden appearance didn't cause any movement in the group. Everyone continued to look straight ahead without blinking. After going through Zhang Peng's training, this army had already shed the last layer of ostentatiousness. It was no longer like before, when they would eagerly call Yu Qianzhou leader when they saw him. In the army, all of their actions were under the command of the army. Salute! Zhang Peng gave the order and took the lead to salute. Nearly 10,000 people simultaneously saluted Yu Qianzhou in unison. This kind of military salute was plagiarized by Yu Qianzhou from his previous life. Although it looked a little disgusting and awkward, Yu Qianzhou felt that it was slightly more comfortable than kneeling, cupping one's hands, and bending one's waist, so he made do with it. When Hongqi saw the sonorous scene of the iron-blooded army, he felt an itch in his heart again. Yu Qianzhou nodded at everyone with satisfaction. Zhang Peng then gave the order, and everyone returned to their original position. Suddenly, Yu Qianzhou spread out his arms and quickly enveloped everyone with his divine sense. In the blink of an eye, everyone disappeared on the spot. Only Hongqi was left at the side, looking around. He asked curiously, "Master, where did they go?" "Worry about your own matters." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and sent him back. He then disappeared as well. Within the ruins of God, the moment Yu Qianzhou appeared in the valley where he had met Shui Mingqing, he saw that the army that had been sent in advance was already spread out in a state of alert. He immediately took out a large pile of illustrations and Jade archives and handed them to Zhang Peng, who was beside him. He instructed, "This is the place where everyone will train. Find a favorable terrain to set up camp and prepare for long-term training. Make sure everyone has time to study these things. I'll go scout out the situation first." After giving some simple instructions, he disappeared again. In that disgusting canyon, Yu Qianzhou appeared in the spider's cave. He looked left and right, then dashed into the depths of the cave in a flash. Unexpectedly, he didn't fly far before he saw an encrypted spider web sealing off the passage. The web was too small, so it was impossible to drill through it. Yu Qianzhou frowned. His body ignited with purple flames, and with a whoosh, he pierced a hole in the spider web. In a large space deep within the cave, the huge spider crawling on the giant spider web flashed with a red light and turned back into that beautiful pregnant woman. Just as she floated down to the ground, Yu Qianzhou had already flashed into the cave abode. He stood in front of her and asked indifferently, "Why did you seal the passage into the cave?" Kai Feng smiled and said, "Please don't misunderstand, Mr. Yu. I was afraid that Mr. would suddenly visit and not be used to seeing me in my original form, so I set up a communication network. As long as someone breaks through the network and enters, I will immediately know and make preparations in advance." Then, she immediately changed the topic and said, "May I know why Mr. Yu has returned this time? Can I trust you?" Yu Qianzhou suddenly asked. The big-bellied Kai Feng was startled. She paused and said, with Mister's discerning eyes, "Can't you see that I have no ill intentions? As for whether you believe me or not, even if I say everything I can, I'm afraid it will be difficult to convince Mr. to completely believe me. Trust is a process that can withstand the test of time. I wonder if I'm right? Yu Qianqiu looked at her in a different light and said, I couldn't tell, but a spider demon like you is quite knowledgeable about the ways of the world. In the ruins of God, demons are humans. In our eyes, the people who barge in are demons. Kai Feng rubbed her big belly and said with a smile, Since I have a name, don't you think it's more appropriate to call me by my name? There's no need to keep talking about spider demons. In that case, I was rude. Yu Qianqiu looked at her belly and said with a faint smile, Then I'll call you Madam Kai Feng from now on. Of course, this is on the basis that I trust you. If I find that you're not trustworthy. Yu Qianqiu walked behind her and gently extended his hand from her waist to touch her big belly. He smiled and said in her ear, Then I'll kill you and the child in your stomach. I'll make your temple rainbow spider bloodline completely extinct. Chapter 9:37. Although these words were spoken with a smile on his face, Kai Feng could still hear a bone-chilling coldness in his words, and she couldn't help but shiver slightly. She pretended to twist her waist in discomfort and avoided his hand. She turned to look at him with a smile as she said, Sir, there is no need for you to threaten this servant. You and I have a cooperative relationship to begin with, so this kind of threat is somewhat unreasonable. Cooperative relationship? Yu Qianqiu snorted. When have we ever cooperated? Kai Feng raised her hand to adjust the golden bone hairpin on her head and shook her head with a smile. We haven't cooperated before, but that doesn't mean we won't cooperate in the future. Besides, the fact that Mr. can come back here and talk to me is already very clear. Mr., you wouldn't come here just to threaten me, would you? Why don't you be honest with me? Otherwise, how will I be able to ask for your help later? Yu Qianqiu realized that this spider spirit was not as simple as she seemed. He immediately raised his eyebrows and snorted coldly. You're very considerate. Speak. What do you want from me? I'm not in a hurry. Kai Feng rubbed her round belly and smiled. Mister, you've come again. What can I do for you? What a smart lady, Kai Feng. Are you trying to figure me out first? Yu Qianqiu shook his head. I don't have anything. I just want to ask you why you ate your own offspring last time. I've been very confused about it. Since Mr. is unwilling to tell me, I won't force you. I'll tell you first. Kai Feng sighed faintly. Actually, this has something to do with what I asked you to help me with. It's not that I want to eat my own flesh and blood, but even if they are born, I won't be able to protect them all. I'm afraid they won't live long. Instead of letting others kill them and feel sorry for them, I'd rather eat them and help their brothers and sisters hatch faster. From what you said, you seem to have some enemies? Yu Qianqiu asked calmly. Mr. is very wise. Little Phoenix sighed and said, On the great flaming mountain thousands of miles away from here, there's a group of giant strength fire apes. I don't know when they started to like forging strange things. Because our temple rainbow spider shells are naturally hard and our claws are naturally sharp. We are their favorite targets. After so many years, our divine temple rainbow spiders have been almost completely exterminated by them. Only me and the two male spiders outside are left. It's so miserable, woo-woo. Yu Qianqiu saw that she started to cry as she spoke, and she was crying so miserably that it didn't seem like she was lying. He frowned and said, You mean that group of giant strength fire apes killed you and used your claws and shells to forge things? On the surface, he looked sympathetic, but in his heart, he was muttering, not to mention others. Even I want to peel off your claws and carapace. Although he thought so, it was not easy for him to meet a demon that could speak in the ruins of God. He wanted to use this opportunity to understand the situation, so he would not kill him for the time being. That's right, Little Phoenix cried and said, In order to protect our divine temple rainbow spiders, I had no choice but to move and hide here. So I understand what you mean. It seems like you want me to help you kill those giant strength fire apes. Yu Qianqiu said with a cold gaze. Tell me how many there are first. Little Phoenix wiped her tears and said, There aren't many, and I don't want Mr. to help me kill them all. I only hope that Mr. can kill their leader, the Ape King, and I can handle the rest myself. I don't dare to trouble Mr. There's also an ape king, so that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu nodded and suddenly asked, but our cultivation is about the same. Since you're not the ape king's opponent, why do you think I can kill it? How high is the ape king's cultivation? Little Phoenix explained impatiently. Although the ape king's cultivation has reached the early stage of great immortal, Mr. can control a divine item like the purple fire. Under the purple fire, how can it be Mr.'s opponent? It should be easy for Mr. to kill it. Since Madame Kai Feng is so confident, I can give it a try. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand towards the outside of the cave and said, Then I'll trouble Madame to lead the way. I'll go meet that ape king. He wasn't afraid of any danger because he could leave at any time. Instead, he wanted to take this opportunity to find someone to lead the way and find out more about the situation in the ruins of God. It would also be convenient for the people of Utopia to train here. Little Phoenix was stunned. She didn't expect him to agree so readily. Her eyes flickered and she couldn't help but hesitate. Yu Qianqiu immediately frowned and said in a deep voice, Could it be that Madame suspects that I have ulterior motives? You should know that if I had any evil intentions towards you, I would have already attacked you. If Madame doesn't lead the way, then let's forget about this matter. I don't dare to wander around the ruins of God. Hearing this, Little Phoenix thought about it and realized that it made sense. If he really wanted to deal with her, there was no need for him to take such a big detour. He immediately smiled and said, Mister, what are you talking about? I just didn't expect Mister to be so straightforward. I'm a little overjoyed. Mister, there's no need to worry too much. Please follow me. With that, he flew out of the cave. Yu Qianqiu followed behind her with a cold smile on his face. He only believed 30% of her words at most. Even though she was crying and laughing at the same time, Yu Qianqiu still remembered the scene of her eating the spider egg with relish. As the saying goes, even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs. This woman's thoughts were clear at a glance. How could he completely believe her? He was afraid that she had said so much just to kill him with a borrowed knife. Flying above the canyon, the two of them flew deeper into the ruins of God. With the thick fog covering his eyes, Yu Qianqiu didn't dare to fly too fast. He had been carefully watching his surroundings. After Kai Feng noticed this, he smiled and said, Mister, you don't have to worry too much. I'm very familiar with the situation in this area. Those who can threaten you and me in the ruins of God usually don't dare to appear here. Yu Qianqiu looked around and couldn't help but ask curiously, Why is that? Could it be that there's some other reason? Mister might not know this, but there will always be someone in charge everywhere. The Divine Ruins realm is the same. Kai Feng sighed. The person in charge of the Divine Ruins realm is a Lion King who has cultivated for countless years. His cultivation has already reached the late stage of the Immortal Emperor realm. A long time ago, a golden-robed man with a very high cultivation came in from the outside and made a bet with the Lion King. In the end, the Lion King was defeated. So he fulfilled his promise of defeat and restricted all the experts in the ruins of God who had reached the immortal stage to not enter this sea of fog. And even more so, they were not allowed to take advantage of the opening of the ruins of God. There were also some even more excessive requirements that were really difficult to speak of, so I won't say it. Chapter 9:38. A golden-robed man who came from outside the Divine Ruins realm could defeat a late-stage Immortal Emperor expert? Yu Qianqiu didn't think too much about it. Who else could it be other than the Immortal Emperor Jin Tai? It was really strange. The rumored Jin Tai was heartless. Since he could defeat the #1 expert in the Divine Ruins realm, it was rare for him to not kill him. Looks like you are quite the courageous one. Others would not dare to step foot into this sea of mist, but you chose to stay inside, Yu Qianqiu said with a smile. He was more or less asking why. Why would I want to take such a big risk? I was really scared by the Ape King. In order to save my life, I could only take care of it for a while, so I took the risk to hide inside. Kai Feng shook her head and smiled bitterly. Didn't Mr. You notice? I hid under the canyon and almost didn't dare to take half a step out of the cave. I even had to hunt for food. I was afraid that others would discover me and spread the news to the Lion King's ears. This time, I hope that Mr. can help me get rid of that evil Ape King and return my freedom. I will definitely repay you in the future." Although the distance between the two of them was very close, it was difficult to see the expression on each other's faces. Yu Qianqiu could not tell if what she said was true or false, and directly replied, "Of course, I am a man of my word. Since I have agreed, I will definitely do my best." "Madam, don't worry." Kai Feng's face, which was separated by the thick fog, was filled with joy. She immediately promised solemnly, "This servant naturally trusts Mr. If this matter is successful, if Mr. has any orders in the future, Kai Feng will do his best." Hee. Yu Qianqiu laughed. He had no intention of talking to her about those things that he didn't know if he would be able to fulfill in the future. He changed the topic. "Didn't the Lion King restrict expert to the immortal stage or above? Why can't I see any fierce beasts in this sea of mist?" Kai Feng immediately explained, "This has nothing to do with the Lion King's restrictions. The main reason is that the Divine Ruins realm opens once every 100 years. Right now, it is not long before the Divine Ruin realm closes. The vicious beasts that were originally wandering in the fog and hunting for food have been killed by you guys from the outside. They are all hiding and do not dare to go in for the time being. After a little longer, after a few years, they will naturally charge in again. So that's how it is." Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but shake his head. It seemed humans were the fiercest, even fiercer than beasts. Although Kai Feng said that there was no danger in the fog, Yu Qianqiu was still vigilant of his surroundings, especially the woman beside him. He was tense on the inside, but relaxed on the outside. The two of them talked and laughed along the way, and their relationship seemed to have begun to harmonize. As they talked and laughed, the scenery in front of them became brighter and brighter, giving people the feeling that they were flying into the light. Kai Feng reminded him, "We're about to get out of this sea of mist," as expected of a local who was familiar with the way. As soon as she finished speaking, their eyes suddenly lit up. The two of them instantly rushed out of the sea of mist, and a vast world appeared in front of Yu Qianqiu. After flying for a short distance, the two of them almost stopped in the air at the same time and looked around. The sun was shining, the mountains and rivers stretched endlessly, and the unknown ancient trees towered into the sky. It was full of vitality, and there was no sign of danger. Kai Feng opened her arms and breathed in the fresh air to her heart's content. An expression of extreme enjoyment appeared on her face as she slightly moaned, "We're finally out again." Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and glanced at her. He turned back to look at the vast sea of mist behind him and asked, "Why is there such a large area of fog in the Divine Ruins realm? It feels a little abrupt. Could it be that someone set up some kind of formation?" Kai Feng opened her eyes and smiled. "I don't know. In any case, it existed a long time ago. With the opening of the Divine Ruins realm as the center, the surroundings are covered by a large area of thick fog. I think we're not too far from the Great Flaming Mountain." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, indicating that they should continue on their way. He had no intention of wasting too much time here. Kai Feng immediately nodded with a smile. She naturally hoped to resolve the trouble as soon as possible, and the two of them quickly flew away. It did not take long before they arrived at a vast swamp. As Yu Qianqiu was wondering why there were no ferocious beasts in this place where ferocious beasts roamed, the white clouds above their heads suddenly surged. A strong and vicious wind covered their heads as a black silhouette suddenly pounced at them at a strange speed. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank slightly. He discovered that the one attacking them was actually a black eagle with a wingspan of more than 20 meters. He immediately teleported hundreds of meters away. However, the phoenix remained completely unflustered as it swung its arm through the air, and its entire arm transformed into a massive spider limb. Like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, it radiated faint golden light as it slashed through the air toward the oncoming falcon. The black eagle seemed to be taken aback. It quickly flapped its wings and tried to dodge. However, it was not faster than Kai Feng at all. A golden light pierced directly into its chest and abdomen without any effort. The black eagle flapped its wings and struggled, but its abdomen was directly cut open by Kai Feng's arm. A rain of blood burst out. Caw! With a sad cry in the sky, the black eagle suddenly fell into the swamp below. Yu Qianqiu was slightly shocked. This spider's limb was really sharp and vicious. His figure flashed, and he chased after the falling eagle. He wanted to take this feathered beast's beast core. But at this moment, a beam of red light suddenly shot out from the swamp below like a cannonball, piercing through the giant eagle that was still alive from 400 to 500 meters away. Then, the red light swept the giant eagle into a black hole that suddenly appeared in the swamp and engulfed it. The black hole was more than 20 meters long and wide. After swallowing the eagle, it quickly closed, followed by a thunderous gulping sound. What is this? Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He quickly stopped and soared into the sky. Following the gulping sound, the swamp quagmire began to move. Pairs of eyes the size of tabletops began to emerge from the mud and grass. Their red eyes were frighteningly huge. Then, many more black holes opened up in the swamp. They were of different sizes, but they were all similar to the black hole that swallowed the eagle. They were all aimed at Yu Qianqiu like cannons. Ha! In the sky, the phoenix turned its sharp limbs back into arms. With a shake of its head, it turned back into the head of a ferocious spider. It fiercely spat out a tyrannical breath, covering the swamp below like a violent gale. The berserk aura swept across, and the swamp below immediately became a mess. The black holes immediately closed up, and giant ugly toads that were 40 to 50 meters long jumped out of the swamp. There were also some that were only 10 meters long. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of huge toads appeared in the swamp, and as the water flowed in, they became muddy puddles. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of huge holes appeared in the swamp, and as the water flowed in, they became muddy puddles. Yu Qianqiu looked down with his mouth agape, and then looked at the huge toads that had disappeared into the distance. He was speechless. He never dreamed that there would be such a huge toad, and he couldn't help but stare blankly. The phoenix shook its head and returned to its original state. It flashed to Yu Qianqiu's side and said with a smile, "There are countless strange beasts in the ruins of God. They are called the heaven-drilling frog, and the curled tongue in their mouth is their sharp weapon for hunting. Don't underestimate their tongue. Its penetrative power is abnormally strong. An adult heaven-drilling frog's tongue can instantly travel 1,000 meters and swallow its prey in one fell swoop. Normal prey's defense is very difficult to resist." Yu Qianqiu's gaze slowly retracted from the place where the toad had disappeared. He looked at the phoenix and said, "Looking at how Madame dealt with them as if they were light, it's really admirable. She was able to scare this group of fierce beasts away with a single breath. It's really not simple." I suddenly thought of something. The phoenix was startled. "What is it?" "I was thinking, if I help Madame kill that ape king, I wonder if Madame will become the overlord of this area?" Yu Qianqiu said with a teasing smile, "I believe that at that time, Madame will no longer have to hide in that ravine that doesn't see the light of day. Then, Madame can run amok in this area with all kinds of prey at her fingertips. Most importantly, without their nemesis, they can safely reproduce the temple rainbow spider bloodline. With the temple rainbow spider's talent, I believe they can reproduce a huge population in the future. I wonder if my guess is correct?" The phoenix was immediately stunned. Yu Qianqiu's guess was right. Although her cultivation wasn't high, her talent was extraordinary, and it was difficult for her to find a natural enemy. She was second only to the giant fire ape king in this area. If the ape king died, then there would be no more opponents for her in this area, and she would become the overlord of this area. Without the nemesis of the ape king, not only would the temple rainbow spiders be able to reproduce in peace, they would also become more and more powerful. This was because their ancestors came from a most mysterious divine phoenix temple in the divine ruin realm, and passed down some things that others didn't know about. As long as they were given certain conditions, they would become extremely powerful. A wise man doesn't lie in front of him. Mr. is roughly right. However, does Mr. think that it's not good for this servant to become the overlord of this area? With the relationship between this servant and Mr., is there any difference between this servant becoming the overlord of this area and Mr. becoming the overlord of this area? The Phoenix said with a smile. The reason why she spoke so frankly was because Yu Qianqiu had guessed that she would use a borrowed knife to kill him, but he didn't expect that she would burn the bridge after crossing it. In fact, she already had a plan, because her temple rainbow spider bloodline was born with a hard and unbreakable carapace, and her claws and teeth were incomparably sharp. It was very rare for her to find a nemesis, so it was impossible for her to keep a natural enemy who could control the purple flames by her side. As long as Yu Qianqiu helped her get rid of the Ape King, she would have a foothold. At that time, she only needed to leak the news that there was a human in the ruins of God who could control the purple flames. Then, there would naturally be experts who would come to take care of Yu Qianqiu. Her plan couldn't be said to be not meticulous, but Yu Qianqiu was originally a treacherous and ruthless person. It was fine if he didn't become suspicious, but once he became suspicious of someone, it would be very difficult to scheme against him. Therefore, after Yu Qianqiu heard her words, a trace of a playful smile hung on the corner of his mouth as he said, "Madam, I like what you said. However, madam, you won't do something like burning the bridge after crossing the river, right?" Chapter 9:39. Mister, you must be joking. I am not Mister's match. How would I dare to have any improper thoughts, unless I'm tired of living? Kai Feng covered her mouth and smiled, brushing the matter aside. Yu Qianqiu had never thought of getting to the bottom of this matter. It was just for safety's sake. He wanted to remind Kai Feng not to treat him as a fool and not to play any tricks on the way to Flaming Mountain. He had to be on guard at all times. The two of them continued on their way, but their speed was much faster than when they were in the thick fog. Along the way, the strange mountains and scenery flashed past them rapidly, making Yu Qianqiu feel a little overwhelmed. Actually, after leaving the thick fog, they were not far from Flaming Mountain. A journey of 700 or 800 li would not take too much time for the two of them. When they saw the tall, maroon-colored mountain in the distance, Kai Feng suddenly made a hand gesture and stopped. Yu Qianqiu stopped as well and asked, "What's wrong?" Kai Feng pointed at the maroon-colored mountain, feeling a little uneasy. She bowed to Yu Qianqiu and said, "That's Flaming Mountain. The Ape King lives there. I'll have to trouble Mister to take care of this matter." Yu Qianqiu looked at the maroon-colored mountain that was emitting black smoke in the distance. It was clearly an active volcano. However, he did not find it strange. Since those colossal armed fire apes like to forge things, it was only natural for them to find volcanoes as a place to rest. He frowned and said, "You mean you want me to go alone? You're not going?" Kai Feng rubbed her belly and said, "That Ape King wants to kill me, but I am not his match. Now that I'm pregnant, I really don't give me that." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand without hesitation and said, "Don't use your pregnancy as an excuse. You've already eaten it, so what else is there to say? Furthermore, I don't know anything about that Ape King. What if you sell him off? Either we go together or we go back together. In any case, it's impossible for me to take the risk alone. Do as you see fit." Kai Feng's hand, which was stroking her round belly, froze. She didn't think that the usually easygoing Yu Qianqiu would suddenly become impatient. She looked at the great flaming mountain in the distance and began to waver. She wasn't sure if she should take this risk. Now that things have come to this, there are some things that I might as well make clear. Yu Qianqiu clasped his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "It's not a problem for me to help you kill the Ape King, but I can't do it for free. After this, you have to help me get 5,000 inner cores of various fierce beasts. If you agree, we'll continue. If you don't, then forget it." He put on the face of a profiteer who was negotiating terms at the last moment. Seeing this, Kai Feng actually relaxed a little and asked suspiciously, "What do you want 5,000 fierce beast inner cores for?" Yu Qianqiu raised his brows and said, "You don't have to worry about that. I naturally have my uses for it. If it weren't for the fact that it's inconvenient for me to travel in the realm of divine ruins as a human, I wouldn't need to ask for your help. You just have to tell me if you agree or not." Kaifeng looked at the great flaming mountain in the distance. After a moment of deliberation, she gritted her teeth and said, "Fine, I agree. As long as you can help me kill the Ape King, leave the 5,000 inner cores of various fierce beasts to me." "You're wrong." Yu Qianqiu waved his finger and said, "The two of us are going to kill the Ape King together. You're so afraid of the Ape King. It makes me wonder if the Ape King is really as weak as you say. Don't tell me you're deliberately sending me to my death." Kaifeng couldn't help but find it funny when she heard this. This man was afraid of wolves in front of him and tigers behind him. It turned out that he was a coward who put on a brave front. She immediately said, with a serious expression, "Mister, you're thinking too much. What I mean is that I want to join forces with Mister to kill the Ape King. When Mister sees the Ape King later, just release your purple fire to burn it. You must know that the power of the purple fire is extraordinary. Then it's a deal. If you dare to go back on your word, don't blame me for being impolite." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "Let's go." The two of them immediately flew toward the great flaming mountain. The great flaming mountain was built in the shape of a cone. The dome was caved in, and black smoke was rising from it. There wasn't a single trace of green on the mountain, and people could feel the rolling heat waves from 1,000 meters away. There were many caves on the mountain, and from time to time, strong apes with fiery red fur could be seen walking in and out of the caves. Compared to other beasts, these animals were only a little more than 2 meters tall, so they couldn't be considered tall. However, their strong arms were very long, almost reaching the ground. When their palms were opened, they were bigger than basins, and when they clenched their fists, they looked like 2 iron hammers. This should be the giant strength fire ape. Yu Qianqiu floated in the air and silently watched the movements on the mountain. He then tilted his head and looked at Kaifeng. He nodded slightly, indicating that they could begin. Kaifeng clenched her teeth and shouted, "Old monkey, get out here." The sound waves spread out, startling the fire apes that were going in and out of the caves. When they saw the two people in the air, the fire apes on the mountain bared their teeth and roared at the sky. They clenched their fists and pounded their chests like drums. They then ran into the caves. When they came out again, there were more of them, and they were all wearing bright armor. They held metal spears in their hands and waved them in the air to demonstrate their power. However, they couldn't fly yet, so they could only worry about the intruders. Soon, a burly man walked out of the biggest cave on the mountainside. His red hair was flying in the wind, and he was dressed rather strangely. He was wearing a pair of gray pants and a pair of light golden metal boots. His upper body was bare, but he was also wearing a light golden metal vest. His arms were exposed. The burly man with red hair waved his arms, and the fire apes that were roaring and demonstrating on the great flaming mountain immediately shut up. The noise instantly disappeared. The red-haired man looked at the sky and immediately laughed heartily. "I was wondering who dared to come here to provoke us. It turns out it's you, Big Spider." As he spoke, he patted the metal vest on his chest and said, "I was just worrying about the lack of materials. The armor I forged wasn't complete, and I couldn't find you big spiders. I didn't expect you to come to me personally." Yu Qianqiu glanced at Kaifeng. It seemed that she wasn't lying about this. This Ape King was really using their shells to forge things. Kaifeng gritted her teeth and said, "Old monkey, don't be so arrogant. Today will be the day you die." "Oh, then I'd like to see." Before he finished speaking, the Ape King had already teleported into the air and stood in front of the two of them. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "I was wondering why you were so brave. So you found a helper. Yeah, you're a human?" Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and nodded. He said, "You're the Ape King?" The Ape King sized up Yu Qianqiu and realized that he couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. His expression became serious, and he replied in a sonorous voice, "That's right, That's me. As the two of them were talking, Kai Feng was getting anxious. She kept giving Yu Qianqiu looks, hinting for him to take the opportunity to use the purple flames to attack. However, she realized that Yu Qianqiu was acting like he didn't see it. She immediately dragged him into the water. Kill him, Yu Qianqiu. The Ape King glanced at Kai Feng, but didn't pay much attention to her. Right now, most of his attention was focused on Yu Qianqiu. He said in a low voice, "You're here to kill me? Do you think so?" Yu Qianqiu smiled. As soon as he said that, Kai Feng immediately panicked. The Ape King stared at him with its big eyes and said tentatively, "If you're not, then I'm going to cut this big spider into 8 pieces. Do as you wish. Actually, I'm not related to her. I've just heard of the Ape King's name for a long time. I'm just finding an excuse to let her lead the way." Yu Qianqiu raised his hand to Kai Feng, indicating that she could do whatever she wanted. Kai Feng immediately shouted angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, you lied to me." As she spoke, she quickly turned into a stream of light and fled. B*TCH. Since you're here, don't even think about running away. The Ape King looked at Yu Qianqiu cautiously. Seeing that he didn't move, it immediately chased after him while laughing. Yu Qianqiu turned around and looked. He shook his head and sighed. "Do you think I'm that easy to use? Since you have ulterior motives, I can only accompany you." Then, he flew toward the 2 people who were chasing after him. In order to not let the Ape King misunderstand, he deliberately slowed down. "Hey, stay here." A loud shout rang out like a bolt from the blue. A huge fist appeared out of nowhere and smashed heavily into the back of the escaping Kai Feng. Bang! Kai Feng's body fell rapidly from the opponent's punch. However, its carapace was tough, so it was not affected by the heavy punch. However, she knew that she couldn't escape. She could only fight with her life on the line. Her falling body stabilized, and with a flash of red light, she revealed her original form of a ferocious giant spider. She flew up again like an octopus, brandishing her dagger and pouncing toward the Ape King. The Ape King immediately laughed and said, "Good timing." Just as he spread his arms to counterattack, he saw the giant spider suddenly spit out a monstrous yellow smoke from its mouth. This was not the Ape King's first time fighting with the temple rainbow spider. Naturally, he knew how powerful the yellow smoke was. It was a highly toxic substance. If he breathed in even a little, his entire body would immediately fester and he would die. The Ape King didn't dare to be careless. With a shake of its body, a torrential, fiery red flame emerged from its body and wrapped its entire body. It rushed towards the yellow smoke, causing the yellow smoke to sizzle on the spot. As soon as he rushed into the yellow smoke, he saw a mess of golden daggers slashing toward him. The Ape King's movements in the air were extremely agile. Instead of retreating, he advanced, completely unafraid of the sharpness of the daggers. He stretched out his wide palm and found a place to strike. He grabbed one of the giant spider's sharp limbs and flashed to the back of the giant spider. The giant spider immediately panicked and struggled in the air. However, the Ape King stomped his foot and stood firmly on its back as if he had grown roots. There was no way he could get rid of him. Thereupon, he flipped his other sharp limb and swung it behind him. The Ape King laughed aloud and easily caught the limb in his hand. Standing on the giant spider's back, the Ape King grabbed one of the spider's legs with each of his hands. He exhaled and pulled the 2 sharp claws like he was rowing a boat. He forcefully pulled them in a figure-8 shape. Crack! The giant spider let out a blood-curdling screech. Both of its sharp claws had been directly pulled off by the Ape King. Yu Qianqiu, who had just arrived, shook his head in amazement when he saw this scene. The Rainbow Temple Spider's claws were so hard that it couldn't be broken with brute force. However, the Ape King was clearly very experienced in dealing with these large spiders. It knew where the spider's hard carapace was, and it easily broke the spider's claws at the joints. Chapter 940. At this moment, the Ape King attacked the spider's shield with its own spear. The two sharp claws in its hands were pierced into the giant spider's hard back, and the giant spider let out a shrill screech that made one's scalp go numb. The Ape King was in for a penny, and it didn't show any mercy when it started attacking. It took advantage of the giant spider's desperate struggle to attack continuously. In the blink of an eye, the Ape King was as fast as lightning on the giant spider's back. 6 of the giant spider's 8 sharp limbs had already been broken, and they were all pierced into the giant spider's back. The giant spider knew that it was already at death's door. It was scared out of its wits. It used all of its skills to roll around in the sky. The Ape King let it do whatever it wanted, and its red hair fluttered majestically as if it had roots under its feet. It broke off another 2 limbs, pierced one into the giant spider's back, and held the other in its hand. It then flashed to the joint between the giant spider's head and neck. Yu Qianzhou's eyes flickered, and he knew that the Ape King was going to give the giant spider the final fatal blow. His gaze suddenly swept past the spider eggs that were like yellow leather balls stuck on the giant spider's abdomen, and he immediately shouted, "Ape King, don't destroy the spider eggs on her abdomen. I still have use for them." The Ape King's red hair fluttered in the wind. He looked very tall and sturdy. He glanced at him and raised his hand to stab down. With a kacha sound, the stab directly pierced into the gap between the spider's head and neck. The stab almost caused the spider's entire head to fall off. The giant spider's back had already been pierced 7 times, and with the fatal blow on its neck, the screeching sound was immediately cut off. The Ape King then bent its body and stretched out its wide palm to break the edge of the giant spider's carapace on the back of its neck. It flipped the giant spider over in the air, and it lifted the giant spider with a single palm before flying toward the flaming mountain at high speed. Yu Qianzhou chuckled and immediately flew after it. When the 2 of them returned to the flaming mountain, they immediately landed in front of the biggest cave on the mountainside. The giant spider's dead body was supported by 8 broken limbs on the ground. The Ape King walked out from under the broken limbs, and it looked at Yu Qianzhou. The red-furred and armored apes on the great flaming mountain immediately brandished the metal spears in their hands and roared excitedly when they saw the great Ape King's bravery. However, they were stopped by the great Ape King with a wave of his hand. Yu Qianzhou walked around the dead spider a few times while clicking his tongue. He even crawled under the spider's huge body to take a look. Because the spider's 8 limbs were a few meters long, there was enough space underneath. The Ape King's gaze followed him all the time. He couldn't figure out if this person was a friend or foe. However, Yu Qianzhou's calm attitude made him even more wary. He was really unfathomable. After circling a few rounds, Yu Qianzhou jumped onto the giant spider's belly, which was facing the sky. There were thousands of spider eggs stuck on its belly. Each of them was yellow and as big as a fist, and they looked like rubber balls. Suddenly, Yu Qianzhou was attracted by something. He squatted down to take a look and saw that there were small spiders swimming around in the slightly transparent spider egg. "Brother Ape." Yu Qianzhou squatted down and stretched his head out. He waved his hand and said, "Come up. I have something to ask." The Ape King's expression twitched, but it still came up. It asked with a vigilant gaze, "What are you trying to do?" Yu Qianzhou didn't mind the distance between him and the Ape King. He had always believed that relationships were nurtured. He stood up and pointed at the spider eggs. "Can these little guys still live?" The Ape King glanced at the thousands of spider eggs and said after a pause, "They have already formed in the eggs. I reckon that they will break out of the eggs soon. As long as they don't cause too much damage and are removed carefully, they should be able to survive." "Is that so?" Yu Qianzhou squatted down again. He hugged a spider egg with both hands and started to play with it carefully. At first, he was worried that the spider egg was too fragile and would break. Later on, he realized that his worries were completely groundless. This thing could withstand the battle between the big spiders and the Ape King without breaking. Its skin was extraordinarily tough. He plucked one and held it in his hands. He looked at it against the sunlight for a while. The small spider inside was soaked in a ball of liquid and was happily waving its claws around. Yu Qianzhou immediately sent it into Utopia and quickly picked up the other spider eggs. You want to hatch these spiders? The ape king stared at his actions and said with a frown, "These spiders are naturally ferocious. In addition, their shells are hard, and they have sharp claws and teeth. They don't have any natural enemies. Once they breed on a large scale, it will be a disaster for other animals. A long time ago, our fire ape race suffered from their cruelty. If they encounter a situation where there isn't enough food, they will even kill each other and eat each other. It can be said that they are innately ferocious. They shouldn't exist in this world." Yu Qianqiu, who had already picked up most of the spider eggs, turned to look at the ape king. He finally knew why the ape king was so ruthless toward the temple rainbow spiders. Other than the fact that their shells could be used to forge things, it was also because of their racial hatred. He coughed and waved his hand. He sighed and said with pity, "The hatred of the previous generation shouldn't be passed on to the next generation. The children are innocent. Don't worry, I'll discipline them well. I won't let them come out and cause trouble again." After saying that, he continued to pick up the remaining spider eggs. His words sounded nice, but no one knew if he really wanted to discipline these small spiders and not let them come out and cause trouble, or if he wanted to domesticate these small spiders to cause trouble. God knew when he had become so compassionate. The ape king was speechless after hearing what he said. It wanted to stop him, but it wasn't confident at all. It could only watch as Yu Qianqiu picked up all the spider eggs. Yu Qianqiu, who had a small harvest, jumped down from the big spider's abdomen after he was done. He waved at the ape king and said, "Brother ape, come down first." The ape king jumped down in confusion. It saw Yu Qianqiu twisting one of the spider's broken legs that was propping itself up. With a bang, the big spider's body instantly flipped to the ground. Yu Qianqiu jumped onto the big spider's back. He hugged the spider's legs that were stuck in the big spider's back. He pulled them out one by one and put them away. Finally, he walked to the big spider's head. He used his hand as a knife and covered it with a layer of purple light. With a swing of his hand, he cut off the big teeth in the spider's mouth. This scene made the ape king suck in a cold breath. He was terrified. He was well aware of the toughness of the divine temple rainbow spider's carapace, especially the teeth on the head and the 8 legs, which were incomparably hard. Who would have thought that with a wave of Yu Qianqiu's hand, he would actually cut off the teeth like a knife cutting through tofu? Just how high was this person's cultivation? The ape king's eyes flickered. It locked onto the purple light on Yu Qianqiu's palm. It fell in a deep thought. It had already guessed that it was because of that purple light. After Yu Qianqiu was done, he rubbed his hands together excitedly. He pointed at the spider's body that had lost its legs and teeth and looked like a ball of meat. He said, "Brother ape, I don't want the carapace on this fellow. It should be enough for you to refine armor. Bullsh asterisk T. The best things have been taken away by you." The ape king was speechless. He gave a perfunctory in a protesting tone. He didn't express any opinion. He hoped that this fellow who came out of nowhere would leave as soon as possible. However, Yu Qianqiu's awareness was not very high sometimes. He stared at the ape king from head to toe, as if he was very familiar with him. Actually, the ape king's appearance was filled with a first-class manly aura. He had thick eyebrows, big eyes that were bright and full. His face shape was generous, his cheekbones were plump, and his lips were thick. He gave off a feeling of righteousness. The only flaw was the stubble on his chin. However, it made him look more manly, especially when a gust of wind blew his red hair on his burly figure. He gave off a feeling that he was a man of indomitable spirit. If he were to be compared with Nongzhu, he definitely wouldn't be as handsome as Nongzhu. However, Yu Qianqiu preferred to look at men like the Ape King. The Ape King was the kind of man that exuded manliness. If he were to be placed in the human world, he would be a man that women would go crazy for. "What do you want?" The Ape King frowned. The other party's gaze kept sizing up his vest and boots, causing him to suspect that after the other party took away the good things on the Temple Rainbow Pearl, he had also taken a fancy to the things on his body. Sure enough, after Yu Qianqiu laughed awkwardly for a while, he pointed to the metal vest on his body and said, "I've long heard that Brother Ape is good at forging things. I wonder if you can take off your armor for me to see. There's nothing to look at if it's a shoddy job. Although the Ape King said this, he was a little proud in his heart. No one in the ruins of God would study this thing. Fighting, or anything like that, depended on one's cultivation and talent. He had only accidentally seen a human who had entered the ruins of God using the earth fire to refine an artifact. Out of curiosity, he had the heart to study it, and gradually, he had found some ways to do so. Brother Ape, could it be that you're afraid they'll take away what you love? Don't worry, I'm just taking a look. Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and guaranteed. The Ape King was no longer stingy. With a complacent heart, he took off his vest and handed it over to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu smiled as he extended his hand to receive it. He discovered that it was extremely heavy in his hand, so heavy that it was hard to believe. He accidentally fell to the ground with a clang sound, directly smashing a small hole in the ground. When this incompetent performance fell into the eyes of the fire ape who was watching from a mountain, it immediately caused a burst of wild laughter. The Ape King was also slightly startled. He felt that with the other party's cultivation, he shouldn't be unable to even lift this thing. Yu Qianqiu did not mind the ridicule around him. He did not care about his face to the point of arguing with a group of monkeys. It was not that he could not lift it. It was just that he had been careless for a moment. He did not expect that a thin vest would actually weigh 10,000 kilograms. Compared to the ratio of volume and weight, this was the heaviest thing he had seen other than the divine sword. A trace of surprise flashed across Yu Qianqiu's face. He then casually waved his hand towards the ground, and the maroon mountain rocks surged out like a fountain, directly arching up to a waist-high conical mound. On top of it was the light golden metal vest. The surrounding fire ape's mocking laughter immediately stopped, and the Ape King's gaze also continuously sized up the rising mound. Chapter 941. Yu Qianqiu was not in the mood to care about what they thought. He circled around the vest and looked at it, touching it. The reason why he had agreed to meet the Ape King was because he had heard from her that the Ape King was good at forging things. That was why he had come. There was no other reason. He now had the intention to create a batch of excellent weapons and equipment for the Utopia army under him. With Chun Feng's refining skills, he could no longer keep up with everyone's improvement speed. Actually, this was not the most important thing. He would never look down on his brothers for having low standards. If their standards were low, he could think of ways to get resources to help them improve. However, Chun Feng had already deteriorated. He was a completely different person from the Chun Feng who looked at life with a smile. He had been ruined by that seemingly pure and cute woman who was now hateful. He had discovered a few times that Xiao Wanqing was stirring up trouble and even sowing discord in front of Chu Ping. He almost could not help but kill her. The entire Utopia was under his control. If he really wanted to pay attention, nothing would be able to hide from him. However, he tolerated it for Chun Feng's sake. After all, Chun Feng was his first brother. If he did not take the final step, he was still a person of flesh and blood. He could not do that. Secondly, he was the one who had made the union between the two of them back then. If there was a mistake, he would also bear a lot of responsibility. He could not ruin Chun Feng's life and then kill him just because he did not like him. He could only hope that some people would behave themselves and give them enough time to consider themselves. They would not drift apart. Even if they could not get along in the end, it would be fine if they went their separate ways. Some things were not good to be ruthless. That would hurt both sides. There was another important reason. He also wanted to make use of Xiao Wanqing to see if Chu Ping could pass the test. Cultivation was endless. Apart from feelings, everyone was going to spend the rest of their lives together. If she did not act like a mistress, she would only cause trouble in the backyard. How could she have the right to be a mistress? Therefore, he had been watching coldly from the side and allowed things to develop. Yu Qianqiu had come to see how the Ape King's craftsmanship was and if he was satisfied. In the end, he discovered that the level of refinement was indeed not that great. But to be able to make such a thin vest so heavy, it would be unreasonable to say that he did not have some skill. He turned around and asked, "Brother Ape, how's the defense of your armor? If an ordinary person wants to break this armor of mine, it's no different from a fool's dream." An early-stage immortal emperor expert, White Rhinoceros King once struck this armor with all his strength, but it only left a slight dent on it. Ape King's complacent voice stopped abruptly. He saw that terrifying purple light appeared on Yu Qianzhou's palm again. He hurriedly stopped Ape King. "Wait, you are not an ordinary person." When Yu Qianzhou heard that even an early-stage immortal emperor expert could only leave a small dent on it, he couldn't help but want to use his purple fire to test it out. However, the Ape King wasn't willing to. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm just trying. I won't destroy your treasure." "Don't." The Ape King snatched the armor back and quickly wore it. Then, he pointed to the corpse of the huge spider at the side and said, "There's no need to try. This armor of mine is made from the shells of over 5,000 mature temple rainbow spiders. If you can break its shell so easily, my armor will probably not be able to withstand it." Over 5,000 mature temple rainbow spider shells were used to forge such a small thing? Yu Qianzhou said in disbelief. No wonder it was so heavy. Then, he pointed to the boots on the Ape King's feet and said, "If I'm not wrong, this should be the same material as the armor you are wearing. Is it included in the 5,000? I used over 3,000 of these boots." The Ape King explained, "Don't be fooled by the large number of boots I used. They were all refined by me countless times before I got rid of the impurities and extracted the essence. I used the shell essence of the temple rainbow spiders to forge them." "Armor essence?" Yu Qianzhou muttered, guessing that was the essence of the temple rainbow spider's carapace. He rolled his eyes and said, "I won't hide it from Brother Ape. I have a friend who is an expert in this path, and is also in the ruins of God. If Brother Ape doesn't mind, I can invite him over. You two might as well spar on this path." He believed that since he was someone who was obsessed with this path, he would definitely have an unusual fanaticism towards it. It should be of some use if he catered to his liking. Sure enough, as soon as the Ape King heard that there was someone who was proficient in this path in the ruins of God, his eyes lit up and he laughed heartily. "Brother Yu, I wonder if your friend is far from here. If it's convenient, why don't you come over and have a chat? It's good for everyone to learn from each other." As expected, their relationship became much closer, and they were already calling each other Brother Yu. "Not far, not far. Brother Ape, please wait a moment. I'll find him right away." Yu Qianzhou said this and immediately turned into a ray of light and flew away. For safety's sake, he threw down a small silver ball on the way and disappeared. In the depths of the purple bamboo forest in the southern sea, Yu Qianzhou quietly appeared and looked around. The purple bamboo was faint, the cold fragrance lingered, and the spiritual energy was dense, like a paradise on earth. The purple bamboo forest was still the purple bamboo forest, but he didn't know how the people here were doing. He had been busy all this time and hadn't been here for a long time. He then flashed towards the direction of the Bamboo Lang Blessed Land. Just as he got closer, he heard two familiar voices talking, and Yu Qianzhou immediately stopped. With his current cultivation, if he wanted to hide and not be discovered, no one would be able to discover him. In the courtyard of the Bamboo Lang Blessed Land, Zi leaned against an old bamboo pole that supported the bamboo archway at the entrance of the courtyard. She lazily looked at Hibiscus, who was sitting cross-legged on the stone platform, and asked, "Hibiscus, does that big liar not want you anymore? Why hasn't he come to see you for so long?" Hibiscus's face was indifferent, and she smiled with certainty. "He won't. Are you so sure?" Zi's spirit was lifted, and she quickly walked to the stone platform. She squeezed her butt onto it and asked with bright eyes, "When my master came back last time, he said that the big liar is not a good person. Do you think that he would like a more beautiful woman outside?" Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou smiled bitterly. That old handsome brother Nongzhu was probably still angry about what happened last time. He shook his head and looked at Hibiscus to see how she would answer. However, once he heard it, he was immediately moved to a mess. "I don't know." Hibiscus smiled with satisfaction. He told me to wait for him in the southern sea purple bamboo forest, so I'll wait for him here. I'll do whatever he asks me to do, and wherever he asks me to go, I'll go. That expression and tone, it was as if to be able to quietly wait for her man to come back was the happiest thing in the world, even if he really abandoned her. What a silly girl. Z.E. sat on the stone platform, and her legs under her purple skirt swung back and forth. She pouted and said, "You'll go wherever he asks you to go? That big liar loves money the most. Be careful that he'll trick you and sell you off one day. Then he must be doing that for my sake." Hibiscus tilted her head and said after thinking for a while, "She couldn't think of any reason for you, Qianqiu, to harm her." Ziyi's eyes widened immediately. She was tongue-tied and said, "He sold you out for your own good. It seems that you've really been deceived by that big liar. The guy is too cunning. He's rotten to the core." Who? Which be *TCH is bad-mouthing me again. Yu Qianqiu walked out from the cobblestone path of the purple bamboo forest with a dark face. Anyone who heard someone bad-mouthing him as soon as they arrived would be unhappy. The two girls turned around at the same time. Surprise appeared on their faces at the same time, and they both got off the stone platform. Z.E., who had just completely denied a certain person's character, ran faster than anyone else when she saw a certain person. She flashed to Yu Qianqiu's side and said with surprise, "Big liar, why are you here?" Yu Qianqiu's face darkened even more. He grimaced and said, "Shut your stinky mouth. What did I lie to you about?" He didn't get angry when she was scolded. Instead, she was very happy. She stuck out her bright red tongue and said, "In any case, you're a big liar." Yu Qianqiu. Hibiscus stood under the bamboo sign with the words, "Zhu Lang blessed land," and shouted in joy. Yu Qianqiu, who was glaring angrily at Z.E. and was about to explode, was instantly hooked by Hibiscus's shout. He directly ignored Z.E. and revealed a smile. He opened his arms and walked quickly towards Hibiscus. Hibiscus took a few steps forward and welcomed him. Then she hugged him. Z.E., who was thrown behind, immediately pouted. It was not a problem for her to hang an oil bottle. "Are you all right? No one bullied you, right?" Yu Qianqiu greedily took a deep breath of the body fragrance that he dreamed about and asked. His palm lightly patted Hibiscus's back. This girl could always give him the simplest, most honest, most sincere, and most pure feelings. If she didn't exist in his life, what meaning would there be in it? Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and thought about it. He couldn't help but hug her even tighter. He wanted to hug her into his bones and never separate from her in this life. "No, everyone is very good to me." Hibiscus closed her eyes and muttered in satisfaction. This embrace was also the most peaceful harbor that she dreamed about. Every time she was in this harbor, she would forget all the troubles and worries in the world. Z walked to the side of the two and snorted coldly, hugging in broad daylight. How shameless. However, there was no place for her in this two-person world. The two of them didn't hear what she said. "That's good." Yu Qianqiu patted her back. He opened his eyes and gently pushed her away. Then, he held her hands and carefully looked at her face. He smiled warmly and said, "My hibiscus is becoming more and more beautiful. Do you like it?" Hibiscus was overjoyed. Yu Qianqiu reached out and touched her nose. He smiled and said, "The more I look at you, the more I like you. I will like you forever. No one can stop me." Hibiscus hugged his arm and leaned her head on his shoulder. She said sweetly, "Me too." In the courtyard of Langxian, Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming had already been attracted by the commotion here. Nanming ancestor shook his head and chuckled as he watched this scene. Nongzhu's face darkened, especially when she saw Z.E. standing there in a shady manner. Her face darkened, and she immediately shouted, "Sect leader you, busy man you, why are you so free to visit my tiny purple bamboo forest in the southern sea today?" Chapter 942. The resentment in Nongzhu's tone was not ordinary. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly at Furong. Furong smiled sweetly and stepped aside. Who said she was stupid? Actually, She knew everything in her heart. She just didn't want to trouble her man. Yu Qianqiu walked into Lang Xian courtyard slowly. He walked to Nongzhu and looked around. He sighed, "This is the best. I envy you." Nongzhu sneered and said, "You don't come to me without a reason. Just say it. What are you doing here? If you don't have anything to say, get out. I don't welcome you here." He was forced to leave in the immortal world. Now that he was forced to come to his territory, he naturally had to take revenge. Get out? What a joke. Yu Qianqiu pointed to the sky disapprovingly and said, "The land under the sky is mine. No one has the ability to make me get out. Don't make trouble. If you anger me, I will burn down the entire purple bamboo forest. Do you believe me?" Nongzhu's expression froze. He knew this guy too well. There was nothing he didn't dare to do in this world. Suddenly, Nongzhu raised his hands and howled at the sky. "Old Bai, if you're not dead, come back and have a look. Once you leave, your disciple doesn't care about me anymore. You are bullying me. Old Bai, come back and have a look. I have been living a very sullen life." He was also a smart man. When the hard way didn't work, he immediately used the soft way. However, it didn't match his image and temperament as an old handsome man. Ziyi saw her master's action and was stunned. She felt that her master was acting shamelessly. She was immediately flustered. Ancestor Nanming looked at the two of them and shook his head. He knew that they would not become enemies no matter how much they quarreled. He laughed and said, "What happened between you two? Why do you act like enemies the moment you see each other?" Although Nongzhu was forced to come back, he still kept his mouth shut about what happened in the immortal world. "Ignore him." Yu Qianqiu looked at Grandmaster Nanming and said, "I came here especially to look for you. Let's talk in private." As he said this, he pointed to the depths of purple bamboo forest. "Looking for me?" Patriarch Nanming was stunned. Nongzhu's sorrowful voice was immediately cut off. She looked at Yu Qianqiu curiously and interrupted. "You came all the way to Nanming? Did something happen?" Yu Qianqiu thought about it and felt that there was no need to hide this matter from Nongzhu. He immediately set up a soundproof enchantment to cover the three of them. He looked at Nongzhu and said, "Senior Nongzhu, do you still remember the Divine Ruin Realm?" Grandmaster Nanming looked a little confused. He did not know about the Divine Ruin Realm. Nongzhu asked curiously, "I remember. Why?" "Then I'll have to trouble Senior Nongzhu to tell Senior Nanming about what happened in the Divine Ruin Realm and the immortal world," Yu Qianqiu said with a solemn expression. Ancestor Nanming asked suspiciously, "What Divine Ruin Realm? The place you went last time? Isn't it the immortal world?" Old Nanming is like this. Since Yu Qianqiu had said so, Nongzhu had no more scruples. After all, it was uncomfortable to hide something from a friend. She immediately told him about what happened in the Divine Ruin Realm and the immortal world. After listening, Grandmaster Nanming could not help but sigh. After everyone cultivated to the soul formation stage, it was not an exaggeration to say that life was boring. He did not expect to miss out on such a bizarre and wonderful experience. Thinking about it, it was not unrelated to Nongzhu's obstruction. Just as he was about to complain, he heard Yu Qianqiu say, "We human cultivators are weak in the immortal world. We are in danger of being annihilated at any time, so we have to work together and work hard to become stronger. Senior Nanming is considered a person of virtue and prestige in the human world. This time, I came all the way to find Senior Nanming, hoping that Senior Nanming can help us gain a foothold in the immortal world." Of course, after Grandmaster Nanming nodded, he asked hesitantly, "But with my cultivation, I'm afraid I won't be of much use in the immortal world. Could it be that you want me to refine magic treasures for everyone?" "Something like that. It's like this." Yu Qianqiu sorted out his thoughts and said, "This time, I returned to the Divine Ruin Realm and went deep into a place that we didn't dare to enter last time. By chance, I met an ape king whose cultivation has reached the early stage of the great immortal realm. This ape king has a unique skill in the art of refining, and the things he refines are really not to be underestimated. I would like to invite Senior Nanming to communicate with him and see if he can learn his skills. Then He can be of some use to us who are struggling in the immortal world." When Nan Ming heard this, he pondered for a moment and did not say anything. It seemed that he was not very interested in the Ape King's unique skill in refining. This greatly exceeded Yu Qianshou's expectations. Logically speaking, people who were obsessed with this path should be somewhat fanatical and should not be indifferent. Could it be that Senior Nan Ming is unwilling? Yu Qianshou smiled awkwardly. If this matter was forced, it would really be a little troublesome. "It's not that I'm unwilling," Grandmaster Nan Ming pondered and said, "If there are enough materials for refining, and my cultivation can also reach a certain realm, to refine some powerful treasures for us cultivators in the human world, we don't have to secretly learn other people's skills. Our own skills are enough." When Yu Qianshou and Nongzhu heard this, they looked at each other and thought that this old fellow was really confident. Grandmaster Nan Ming looked at the two of them and knew what they were thinking. He probably thought that he was boasting. After a moment of hesitation, he slowly asked, "The two of you have stayed in the immortal world before. There used to be a great refining sect in the immortal world called Mythical Fire Palace. I wonder if it still exists." Mythical Fire Palace? Yu Qianshou and Nongzhu cried out in surprise at the same time. Then they looked at each other, and their eyes told each other that they had not told him anything about the immortal world. Nongzhu thought about it for a moment. She had just told Grandmaster Nan Ming about the Divine Ruin Realm and the immortal world in a simple and clear manner. She had not mentioned anything about the Mythical Fire Palace at all. Yu Qianshou also recalled what Nongzhu had said just now and confirmed that she had not mentioned the Mythical Fire Palace. Nongzhu looked Grandmaster Nan Ming up and down and said, "Old man Nan Ming, how do you know that there is a mythical fire palace in the immortal world? Did someone tell you anything? During this period of time, I have been staying in the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest. Even you've been hiding it from me. Naturally, no one has told me anything." Grandmaster Nan Ming sighed slightly and said, "In that case, the mythical fire palace in the immortal world still exists." Yu Qianshou's gaze fell on Grandmaster Nan Ming's red hair, red beard, and red eyebrows. He rubbed his chin and nodded thoughtfully. He seemed to have thought of something and immediately raised his elbow to nudge Nongzhu and said, "What is your impression of Hui Yunlong from the Mythical Fire Palace when you first saw him?" Nongzhu was stunned and her mouth was slightly agape. When she first saw Hui Yunlong, she had felt strange. Why did this kid look so much like Grandmaster Nan Ming? Those who did not know would have thought that they were father and son. After thinking about it, she could not help but cry out in surprise, "Old man Nan Ming, could it be that you came from the Mythical Fire Palace in the immortal world?" Yu Qianshou, on the other hand, frowned. If Grandmaster Nan Ming came from the Mythical Fire Palace, then he would not have asked whether the Mythical Fire Palace still existed in the immortal world. However, he must have some connection with the Mythical Fire Palace. As expected, Grandmaster Nan Ming sighed softly and said, "It's not that I came from the Mythical Fire Palace. It's my ancestor who came from a Mythical Fire Palace. I have never mentioned this secret to anyone. Now that the path to the immortal world has been opened, there is no harm in telling the two of you. However, I beg you to help me keep it a secret. Of course, tell us quickly." Nongzhu's eyes shone as she nodded repeatedly. She had always been quite interested in the privacy of others. However, Yu Qianshou asked in a low voice, "Could it be that your ancestor is related to the Myriad Swords demon monarch who fought a fierce battle between the immortal world and the netherworld 100,000 years ago?" "How do you know?" Grandmaster Nan Ming was stunned. Yu Qianshou smiled and said, "I guessed. Actually, he knew better than anyone that if Grandmaster Nan Ming's ancestor came from the Mythical Fire Palace in the immortal world, then he must have come during the great battle 100,000 years ago. After that, the immortal ascension stage was sealed, and the people of the immortal world could not come down at all. If they wanted to come to the human world through the netherworld, regardless of whether the netherworld was willing to let them or not, as long as the gate to the netherworld was opened, the Demon Ghost Region's Torture Master would definitely know about it. However, none of the previous Torture Masters had mentioned this matter, So the only possible conclusion was 100,000 years ago. AI, you guessed correctly. Grandmaster Nanming sighed slightly and said, the mythical fire palace in the immortal world was first founded by two people. The eldest was called Huolai, and the second was Huijun. They were brothers born from the same mother. After the founding of the mythical fire palace, the eldest Huolai was called the Grand Palace Lord, and the second Huijun was called the Second Palace Lord. Then, the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch appeared out of nowhere. Immortal Emperor Jin Tai and Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi joined forces to fight, but they still could not defeat him. Hence, they each gathered people from both worlds to fight against the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. The high-ranking sects in the immortal world all received an order from the Immortal Palace. Each sect had to send a person with the highest cultivation other than the sect master to participate in the battle, or else they would be severely punished. Nongzhu shook her head and said, I don't know what the Immortal Emperor was thinking. The people with the highest cultivation in the immortal world were naturally the sect masters. Wouldn't it be better to just ask them to participate in the battle? They would be more useful. I don't know about this. The ancestors' records didn't explain this, Grandmaster Nanming said. Yu Qianqiu pondered and said, the situation at that time was already very dangerous. Everyone knew how powerful the Demon Lord of Swords was. They all knew that fighting with him was no different from sending themselves to death. If the Immortal Emperor directly summoned the sect masters to participate in the battle, it might have the opposite effect. Don't think that the people in the immortal world are good people. They will submit to whoever's fist is harder. At that time, the Demon Lord of Swords was the most powerful. If Jin Tai sent the sect masters to their deaths, then the sect masters might turn around and help the Demon Lord of Swords to fight Jin Tai. At least their chances of survival would be much higher. Jin Tai naturally didn't just rely on his fist to rule the entire immortal world. He definitely wasn't that stupid. He should understand this and wouldn't let himself fall into a situation where he was surrounded by enemies. You're so cunning. I can tell that you and Jin Tai are the same kind of people. Both of you are not good people, Nongzhu said in disdain. She then said to Grandmaster Nanming, Old Man Nanming, continue. Chapter 943. Old Ancestor Nanming nodded and said, the Immortal Palace's request is to send the person with the highest cultivation other than the sect leader to participate in the war. This request is not a problem for other sects, but for the Mythical Fire Palace, it is a big problem. Because the situation of the Mythical Fire Palace is special, the two palace lords are similar to the sect leader, so they have always been equal. Therefore, they asked the Immortal Palace if they could keep both palace lords. But the Immortal Palace's attitude is very firm. They can only keep one sect leader, unless there is someone with a higher cultivation than them. But the two of them are the founders of the Mythical Fire Palace, so there is no one in the Mythical Fire Palace who has a higher cultivation than them. In this way, one of them has to participate in the war. So, your ancestor is one of the two founders of the Mythical Fire Palace? Nongzhu touched her chin and laughed. Old Man Nanming, I really didn't know that you have such a big background. Old Ancestor Nanming frowned and said, the Immortal Palace is powerful, so there was no other way. Second Palace Lord Huijun took the initiative to participate in the war. The Grand Palace Lord Huolai was very touched, so he asked Second Brother to stay and decided to go alone. Anyway, both of them are in the early Immortal Emperor stage, so it doesn't matter who stays. But in the end, Second Brother listed all kinds of reasons and insisted on going, so the First Brother had no choice but to agree. But unexpectedly, on the eve of departure, Second Brother got into a dispute with a sect called the Heavenly Robe Sect and was injured by them. Even if he wanted to participate in the war, the Immortal Palace wouldn't agree. So the next day, Eldest Brother took Second Brother's place and came to the human world to participate in the war against the Demon Lord of 10,000 Swords. TSK. So you are the descendant of the Grand Palace Lord who founded the Mythical Fire Palace. Nongzhu sighed and said, I have heard of the Tianyi sect who injured second brother in the illusionary immortal city, but they were eradicated by the mythical fire palace a long time ago. That war seems to have caused quite a big impact in the immortal world. Even now, people are still talking about it. It seems that the Tianyi sect suffered because they had a feud with the leader of the mythical fire palace. No wonder. On the other hand, Yu Qianqiu frowned and muttered, he was injured on the day before we set off. What a coincidence. He had always been a suspicious person. Whenever he encountered something like this, he would be suspicious. To put it nicely, he was far-sighted and prepared for a rainy day. To put it bluntly, he was gauging the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. Nongzhu was not good at quarreling when it came to serious matters. Otherwise, he would not have been chosen as the successor of the previous two punishment masters of the Demon Ghost region. Hearing what Yu Qianqiu said, he suddenly raised his eyebrows and squinted at the ancestor of Nanming, saying, Old man Nanming, there may be some hidden story behind this. The timing is too coincidental. Most importantly, think about what time it was. That was when the Myriad Swords demon monarch was wreaking havoc in both the immortal and netherworld. At that time, the various sects would have restrained themselves. It's not right for something like this to happen at this time. The ancestor of Nanming looked at the two of them and nodded, saying, You're right. There is indeed a hidden story behind this. Boss came to the human world and participated in several encirclements against the Myriad Swords demon monarch. Luckily, he did not die. In one fierce battle, he saved a deacon of the Heavenly Robe sect. In fact, he did not mean to save him, but at that stage, everyone had no way out and could only unite to fight against the enemy. When they could help each other, they would help each other. However, the deacon was seriously injured and could not be saved. Before he died, out of gratitude to Boss, he revealed a secret. It turned out that there was another hidden story behind the conflict between the second brother and the Heavenly Robe sect. In order not to take the risk of participating in this battle, he conspired with some people in the Heavenly Robe sect to put on a show and finally persuaded Boss to participate in the battle. Alas, that deacon of the Heavenly Robe sect was one of the people involved in the show. Nongzhu sighed and shook her head, saying, Alas, Boss must be heartbroken after knowing this. It must not feel good to be schemed against by one's own brother. I just don't understand that second brother. Since Boss had already said that he would participate in the battle, why did he have to fight endlessly with Boss? Isn't this an unnecessary move? Yes, Boss was very sad. In the beginning, he did not believe it, but he knew that the words of a dying man are kind. There was no need for that deacon of the Heavenly Robe sect to lie to him before he died. Later on, when he thought about second brother's previous actions, there were indeed some loopholes. It was just that he trusted his brother too much and did not suspect anything. Elder ancestor Nanming sighed. You are the same kind of person as second brother. What do you think of this? Nongzhu asked Yu Qianqiu. You're the same kind of person as second brother. Yu Qianqiu immediately retorted, but then he frowned and said, when it comes to things like history, the general framework shouldn't be wrong, but the minor details can't be completely trusted. You can't just blindly follow what everyone says. I'm afraid only the people involved know what exactly happened best. Oh, Nongzhu's eyes lit up, and she said, Did you see something? Why don't you say it, and let us hear your wise opinion. Elder ancestor Nanming looked over, also wanted to hear what wise opinion Yu Qianqiu had. It's not a wise opinion, but Senior Nanming, please don't be angry when I say it. It's just my guess. Yu Qianqiu smiled. Elder ancestor Nanming smiled and said, It's something that happened 100,000 years ago. Is there a need for me to be angry? Just say it, I'm all ears. Yu Qianqiu nodded and organized his thoughts. Then he said, Not everything that comes out of a person's mouth is the truth, even though that boss is your ancestor. Naturally, I'm not saying that your ancestor is lying. It's just that this matter has already passed for 100,000 years. We have no way to verify the truth unless the Li-Fire Palace leader, Hu Jun, is willing to announce the truth. But that's impossible. However, I don't think that the words that Huolai left behind for your descendants are true. I reckon that not many ancestors would purposely leave their ugly side for their descendants to admire. You don't have to talk about the big theory. Nongzhu urged. Just tell me directly what's wrong with Huolai's words. Purple bamboo leaves swirled and floated down from time to time in the bamboo jade paradise. The two women in the courtyard stared at the three men, talking loudly. The three men's expressions and actions were sometimes arguing fiercely, sometimes frowning, and sometimes beaming with joy. Although the two women couldn't hear what they were saying, they could more or less feel the unique charm of the men when they were talking about serious matters. Men in such situations were often more attractive to women. However, most of the time, the two women's gazes were focused on Yu Qianqiu. At this time, Yu Qianqiu's status and cultivation were much higher than the other two. The aura that unconsciously leaked out from his words and actions was obviously a notch higher than the other two. One had to admit that it was easy to attract the women's attention. That's the problem. As you said before, since the big brother has already said that he wants to participate in the war, then why does the second brother have to fight endlessly? It is indeed an unnecessary move. Yu Qianqiu's gaze suddenly became deep. He narrowed his eyes and said, but the crux of the problem is if the big brother really wants to participate in the war and the second brother really doesn't want to risk coming to the human world to participate in the war, I can't think of any reason for the second brother to deliberately beat around the bush. He just needs to decline slightly. If the big brother really wants to leave for the sake of his younger brother, the second brother can easily stay. I'm just afraid that the truth is that the big brother is the one pretending to decline. Nongzhu slowly nodded and said, that makes sense. I think I understand what you mean. Ancestor Nanming fell into deep thought. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the two of them and continued. You must know that the second brother colluded with the people of Tianyi Sect to plot against the big brother. He took a great risk. Once the people of Tianyi Sect threatened the second brother afterwards, the consequences can be imagined. In fact, it is impossible for the people of Tianyi Sect to help for nothing. After that, they will definitely use this to threaten the mythical fire palace to obtain their own benefits. I'm afraid that the reason why the Tianyi Sect was finally eliminated by the mythical fire palace must have something to do with this. It is highly likely that the second brother wants to silence the second brother. Yu Qianqiu finally asked, think about it again. If the big brother really wanted to participate in the war, why would the second brother pay such a great price and take such a great risk? Then the truth is very likely that after the mythical fire palace received the decree from the immortal palace, one of the two brothers had to participate in the war. But the two brothers were actually not willing to take the risk because at that time, the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch's limelight was too strong. With the strength of one person, he could fight against the huge forces of the immortal and netherworld alone. He was completely invincible in the three realms. How many people would not be afraid of him? Nongzhu nodded and said, in other words, the two brothers actually did not want to participate in the war, so they pretended to decline. And the second brother was a little more scheming. Although he pretended to decline, he pretended to be serious and insisted on going. Because he was too decisive, even the big brother did not see through it. But it was to the big brother's liking. So the big brother pretended to agree reluctantly. Little did he know that the second brother was farsighted. In order to save his life, he played a dirty trick at the critical moment. The big brother was fooled just like that. He did not even know that he was betrayed by his own brother. Instead, he shed tears of gratitude and went to participate in the war. Who knew that after that, he accidentally found out the truth in the human world. I guess he was almost mad at that time. Who knows how he made up his second brother in his last words. After the analysis, he turned to old ancestor Nanming and asked, Old man Nanming, did your big brother's ancestor's last words scold the second brother to be worse than a pig or a dog? Old ancestor Nanming was speechless. Although he did not know whether the analysis of the two fellows was right or wrong, it was indeed very possible. And the ancestor's last words were indeed as Nongzhu said. scolding the current mythical fire palace's sect leader, Huijun, to be worse than a pig or a dog, and was very shameless, seeing that old ancestor Nanming's face did not look too good. Yu Qianqiu kindly comforted him. Senior Nanming, actually, you may not be happy to hear this. Although the second brother is unscrupulous, it is obvious that his strategy is better than the big brother's. The current mythical fire palace's sect leader, Huijun's cultivation, has reached the intermediate immortal emperor stage. He is one of the top experts in the immortal world. The mythical fire palace can stand tall in the immortal world where thousands of sects fight against each other, and its strength can even be ranked at the top, all thanks to sect leader Huijun's contributions. To put it bluntly, if the mythical fire palace was controlled by the big brother, it might not be where it is today. Maybe it would have collapsed long ago. 100,000 years. That is not a small amount of time. There are countless sects in the immortal world that have declined and been annihilated. The reason why the mythical fire palace can stand tall until now and become one of the top ancient sects in the immortal world is worth pondering. So, your ancestors' loss was not unjust. Chapter 944. Yes. Nongzhu nodded and said, Second brother is really good. Not only did he retreat before advancing, but he also played a trick to confuse Big Brother. He even cried and shouted to go with us. Big Brother is really touched by this brotherly love. Unfortunately, there was an accident. The eldest brother didn't expect that it was his beloved younger brother who was playing dirty. Therefore, the eldest brother was willing to die without any complaints. If the eldest brother didn't happen to know the truth, perhaps he would still remember the brotherly relationship until the day he died. TSK. Second brother is really powerful. No wonder mythical fire palace can survive for so long. I say, old man Nanming, don't be angry anymore. After all, if you count your ancestors' generation, you and the current mythical fire palace sect leader Huijun are the same ancestor. The matter has already passed for so long. Let the past be in the past. Did I say what I'm complaining about? The Nanming ancestor didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't know why these two fellows were consoling him here. He immediately rolled his eyes and said, I say, have the two of you already made friends with the people of the Li-Fire Palace in the immortal world? If not, why are you guys speaking up for the Li-Fire Palace? Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu were speechless at the same time. Ancestor Nanming hit the nail on the head. Yu Qianqiu really did become friends with the mythical fire palace, although it was a false friendship. Nongzhu hurriedly said, Old Nanming, from what you said before, did your ancestor pass down the craftsmanship of refining treasures from the mythical fire palace? Yu Qianqiu immediately thought of this, and his eyes lit up. Ancestor Nanming paused and said after a moment of silence, Yes, it was indeed passed down. Originally, my ancestor was lucky enough to survive until the last battle against the demon monarch of 1,000 swords in the immortal world and the underworld. He could have returned to the immortal world to settle the score with second brother, who knew that at this time, the sky would change, and countless golden thunderbolts that had never been seen before fell from the sky. Golden thunderbolts? Really? Nongzhu was stunned. Yu Qianqiu was not surprised, because he had heard from Bai Changchun that there were indeed countless golden thunderbolts cleansing the human world. As for what happened, he did not know. It shouldn't be fake. Grandmaster Nanming recalled and said, My ancestor's last words said that the power of that golden thunderbolt was very strong. It almost killed all the experts of the immortal realm and the netherworld who were wandering in the mortal world. Even the emperor of the immortal realm and the emperor of the underworld couldn't escape. Luckily, the cultivation of those two was indeed strong. However, it still scared the two supreme martial artists of the immortal realm and the netherworld so much that they fled in panic. My ancestor was lucky. Although he wasn't directly struck by the golden thunderbolt, he was still implicated by the aftershock. He was an early-stage immortal emperor expert, and he became immortal. Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu looked at each other. Even the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld had to flee. Therefore, the power of the golden thunderbolt was unimaginably terrifying. Nongzhu asked in confusion. No matter what, he was an early-stage immortal emperor expert. Even if his cultivation was destroyed, he shouldn't have degenerated into a mortal with the strength of his body. Grandmaster Nanming shook his head and said, I don't know why my ancestor was beaten into a mortal. In the end, we can only blame it on the wrath of heaven. Yu Qianzhou was thoughtful when he heard this. He used thunder and lightning to forge his immortal body. Maybe the golden thunderbolt could really beat an immortal cultivator into a mortal. Not only was he beaten into a mortal, but his dantian was also destroyed. Grandmaster Nanming sighed and said, In this way, the possibility of my ancestor returning to the immortal realm was completely cut off. Think about it. How long can a person live after becoming immortal? The limit of his lifespan became the biggest problem. My ancestor felt that death was approaching step by step, but he was still unwilling. He married a wife and had children in the mortal world. Before he died, he left a will for his descendants, hoping that one of them would return to the immortal realm to help him take revenge and regain the power of the mythical fire palace. However, his descendants were only mediocre mortals. They didn't have the aptitude to cultivate. Fortunately, after experiencing all kinds of calamities for 100,000 years, the inheritance didn't break until I was born. Sigh. However, the path of immortal ascension is long and difficult. Moreover, there's no need for me, a descendant, to continue the hatred from 100,000 years ago. Yu Qianzhou and Nongzhu sighed. They didn't expect a dignified, early-stage, immortal emperor expert to end up like this. They couldn't help but sigh at how unfortunate his fate was. Since Grandmaster Nanming has the refining skills of the mythical fire palace, it seems that there's no need to go to the God-ruined realm to steal the craftsmanship of the Ape King. Nongzhu glanced at Yu Qianzhou and said, Maybe I'm ignorant. Yu Qianzhou pondered for a moment and said, But I think the craftsmanship of the Ape King is indeed extraordinary. Senior Nanming, why don't you take a trip with me? If it's really not worth mentioning, we'll come back. All right, I'll go with you to take a look. Grandmaster Nanming's tone was filled with pride. Yu Qianzhou immediately smiled and removed the soundproof enchantment. He walked straight to Furong, who was looking forward to seeing him. He held Furong's hand and said, I'm leaving again. Furong just nodded and said, I'll wait for you to come back. I'll come and pick you up as soon as possible. Yu Qianzhou looked around after letting go of her hand. There was a hint of doubt in his expression. Furong smiled and said, Sister Yin and the others are cultivating in seclusion in the backyard. They're preparing to help you in the future. Let's go and see them. Yu Qianzhou immediately released his divine sense to scan the backyard. He saw that Yin Yu and the Enchantress of 100 Charms were sitting cross-legged in a row of quiet bamboo houses in the backyard, concentrating on cultivating. Seeing that the two of them were fine, he shook his head and said, I won't disturb them for now. Furong obediently agreed. Yu Qianzhou then took out a flying shuttle and flew into the sky. He turned and raised his hand to Grandmaster Nanming and said, Senior Nanming, follow me to the East Holy Land first. Grandmaster Nanming nodded and leaped onto the flying shuttle. Speaking of the East Holy Land, Nongzhu seemed to have thought of something. She asked in a flash, Why are you gathering all the cultivators who know how to refine pills to the East Holy Land? You'll know in the future. Yu Qianzhou cupped his hands and bid farewell. Zi, who had been ignored for a long time, suddenly shouted, Big liar! Where are you going? Take me to play with you. Play with me on the bed? Are you coming? Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes and ignored her. He teleported onto the flying shuttle and drove it away like a stream of light. Zi was so angry that she stomped her feet and cursed him for being a big liar. Nongzhu stared at Zi in a daze. She had 1,000 thoughts in her mind, but she didn't know what to say. She only felt bitterness in her mouth, and her whole body was filled with powerlessness. The current Yu Qianzhou was no longer the same as before. Nongju was completely powerless to control him. Although Zi liked him, she didn't know how to please a man. Yu Qianqiu was also someone who could be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. How was he supposed to fulfill his daughter's happiness? On the flying shuttle, Grandmaster Nanming was secretly speechless at Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. He felt that the speed at which Yu Qianqiu drove the flying shuttle seemed to be faster than a cultivator at the last stage of the soul formation realm. It was no wonder that he wanted to use the flying shuttle to carry him. Little did he know that if it wasn't for the fact that Yu Qianqiu didn't want to expose his ability to teleport between realms to too many people, he would have brought him to the Divine Ruin realm long ago. There was no need for him to come to the Eastern Holy Land. This was the first time Grandmaster Nanming visited the underground palace left behind by the cultivators of the Netherworld. After learning that it was a teleportation formation, he didn't even have time to look at it in detail before the scene in front of him changed. He was in a dark and dense forest that covered the sky. Stepping on the thick, rotten leaves, Grandmaster Nanming looked around at the unknown ancient trees around him and asked in shock, "This is the Divine Ruin realm?" "Yes, follow me," Yu Qianqiu called out and dashed out of the forest. Grandmaster Nanming followed. Yu Qianqiu waved his arm and pointed at the maroon mountain in the distance that was emitting black smoke. "That is the great flaming mountain where the Ape King lives. It is indeed a good place to refine things," Grandmaster Nanming judged with the eyes of an expert. After Yu Qianqiu told him some things to take note of and avoid, the two of them dashed forward together. In a short while, they arrived in front of the cave at the mountainside of the Great Flaming Mountain. When someone barged in, the great strength fire apes in the various caves on the mountain immediately roared and roared. When they saw that it was Yu Qianqiu, they quieted down. It was Grandmaster Nanming's first time seeing the great strength fire apes, so he naturally couldn't help but take a few more glances. Yu Qianqiu was just about to call out to the Ape King when it was alarmed by the commotion outside the cave. "Ha! Brother Yu is finally here," the Ape King said with a laugh. When it saw Grandmaster Nanming, it guessed that he should be the person that Yu Qianqiu mentioned. It couldn't help but size him up carefully. When it realized that he only had the cultivation of middle-stage deity transformation, it couldn't help but look a little doubtful. It wondered if this person was really an expert in this field. After Yu Qianqiu introduced the two of them, Grandmaster Nanming felt a little apprehensive. After all, it was his first time seeing a great immortal realm cultivator. His gaze lingered on the metal vest on the Ape King's body. It was probably the one that Yu Qianqiu mentioned. The Ape King then waved its hand toward the cave and said, "Please come in. Let me see Mr. Nanming's refining skills." Hee. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said politely, "We are guests, so how can we usurp the host position? Brother Ape, you should let us see your superb skills first." He had made up his mind. If Grandmaster Nanming liked the Ape King's skills, then he would talk about it. If not, then he would not waste time and send Grandmaster Nanming back as soon as possible. "All right." The Ape King waved its hand straightforwardly. "Please come in." It led the two of them into the cave. The cave was spacious enough to accommodate 7 to 8 people walking side by side at the same time. Waves of heat surged out from the inside. After walking for a short distance, there was a stone staircase that slowly led downwards. The three of them quickly arrived at the belly of the empty mountain that was emitting red light. There were many giant strength fire apes moving about inside. Looking up, the great flaming mountain was hollow. It was like looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. They could see the blue sky and white clouds above. The Ape King looked at the two of them who were looking around. Suddenly, it let out a roar that reverberated in the empty mountain. Immediately, as if it had issued a command, many running footsteps could be heard from the small caves around them. 2 giant strength fire apes carried the big spider's corpse out. Chapter 945. The caverns of all sizes around the empty mountainside were suddenly filled with uniform chants that sounded like the pulling of a rope. Then, the sound of drums rose and fell continuously. On the rocky ground in the center of the mountainside that was emitting red light, countless red flames shot out from the cracks of the rocks, as if something was blowing them out from the ground. As the flames rose higher and higher, the red flames gradually turned from red to green and white like a sharp glint. Yu Qianqiu and Ancestor Nanming were both curious. They released their divine senses to investigate the surrounding caverns of all sizes. They saw that below those caverns, there were large iron boxes embedded in the stone walls. The airflow was rushing, and a group of giant strength fire apes were pushing and pulling a huge piston rod in front of the iron box. It was actually a bellow. There was naturally more than one bellow like this. There was one bellow in all the caverns of all sizes. Yu Qianqiu and Ancestor Nanming looked at each other. The former immediately transmitted his voice to the latter. "Do you guys also do this when you forge?" The latter paused and replied, "This is the most primitive method. Are you sure that his forging skills are really unique?" The former was speechless for a moment before replying, "Let's wait a little longer. Maybe he has found another way to do it." The two then saw the two giant strength fire apes carrying the huge spider's corpse suddenly throw something into the green and white blazing fire formation that was 100 meters in radius. Bang! Rubble flew everywhere with sparks. The sound of drums did not stop. It was obvious that the fire apes had been pushing and pulling with all their might. The three of them stared at the huge spider's corpse that was burning in the flames for a long time, but they did not see any change in the huge spider's corpse. The Ape King had his hands behind his back and his legs slightly spread apart. He stood there with a righteous and awe-inspiring air, appearing to be very patient. Yu Qianqiu and Ancestor Nanming thought that he was going to do something shocking, but after waiting for a long time, they gradually realized that something was wrong. Could it be that cough? Yu Qianqiu coughed and asked, "Brother Ape, didn't you want to show us your forging skills? What are you waiting for?" The Ape King turned around and looked at him as if he was an amateur. He waved his hand and pointed at the huge spider's corpse in the flames. "Naturally, I am waiting for the fire force to clear before I forge." Grandmaster Nanming's cultivation base was the lowest among them. Originally, he had been waiting patiently even if he was impatient. However, when he heard the Ape King's words, he could not help but turn around and cry out in surprise together with Yu Qianqiu. "Is there a problem?" The Ape King was puzzled. Grandmaster Nanming could not help but ask, "Are you going to keep waiting like this?" The Ape King immediately snorted coldly and said, "Do you have a better idea?" That. Yu Qianqiu swallowed hard and interrupted, "Don't worry, Brother Ape. What he meant was, how long will it take for the fire force to be fully activated?" The Ape King looked at the burning flames with a serious expression and said, "The shell of the temple rainbow spider is extraordinarily hard. It will take at least 10 days and 10 nights for the fire to penetrate it." 10 days and 10 nights? Yu Qianqiu cried out in surprise again. This time, he did not plan to give face to the Ape King. He did not have so much time to play with him slowly. He turned and asked Grandmaster Nanming, "Do you have any way to make it faster?" In reality, he could easily solve this problem himself. However, he was not too familiar with the situation in the Divine Ruin Realm. It was not convenient for him to take out the blue and purple flames to show off. It's very simple. Most master refiners will use some external objects to raise the temperature of the fire, such as using kerosene and the like. Grandmaster Nanming glanced at the Ape King as if he was worried that he would be unhappy. When he saw that the Ape King was also listening attentively, he felt relieved and continued. However, true master refiners are more or less proficient in the arrangement of formations. This is because a good artifact has the existence of formations integrated into it. Whether a treasure is good or not, other than the key factor of raw materials, the fusion of the formation and the treasure is also very important. We usually see all kinds of miraculous effects from treasures, and this is all because of the formation. Because they are proficient in formations, Most of them will set up a fire-gathering formation at the place of refinement to condense the strongest fire temperature to speed up the smelting of the artifact. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and looked at the Ape King with a disdainful expression. He thought to himself, "Old monkey, look at him. This is a true master refiner. Just the theoretical knowledge that he talks about is already set after set. It's hard to not be convinced. Unlike you, who is still using such a primitive method." Formation? The Ape King was stunned. Back then, he had only unintentionally seen an ordinary cultivator forging things. What he saw was similar to an ordinary blacksmith forging iron. There was no way he could be compared to a blacksmith who was an expert in blacksmithing like the Nanming ancestor. In the endless months that followed, he had been fumbling around by himself. He had never come into contact with a master refiner like the Grandmaster Nanming, so it was not strange that he did not know. "Brother Ape, why don't you let Mr. Nanming help you set up a fire-gathering formation?" Yu Qianqiu pointed at the place where the flames were blazing. The Ape King came back to his senses and immediately cupped his hands at the Grandmaster Nanming. "Please enlighten me, Mr. Nanming." He revealed a hint of modesty now, but he still wore an expectant look on his face. It was as if he was waiting to see if Mr. Nanming was good at talking or doing well. The Grandmaster Nanming did not stand on ceremony. He took out a handful of spirit stones from his storage pouch and threw them into the stone walls around the flames. One handful was not enough, so he took out dozens of top-grade spirit stones in succession. Only then was he able to set up a complicated formation in the belly of the mountain. After setting up the formation, he pinched his fingers and cast several spells into the formation. The fire-gathering formation was immediately activated. In an instant, the airflow in the belly of the mountain surged and condensed violently. The Ape King and Yu Qianqiu could only feel the rolling heat waves in the belly of the mountain diminishing rapidly. They were suddenly swallowed back to the center of the mountain where the heat was spreading. The greenish-white flames that emerged from the cracks of the crushed stones on the ground looked as if they had encountered a tornado. The flames that rose high up in the sky began to swirl and gather toward the giant spider's corpse that was burning in the center. The Grandmaster Nanming then cast several spells to adjust the formation. The greenish-white flames that were sweeping toward them were like flowing clouds, wrapping around the giant spider's corpse and burning it to its heart's content. The effect of the gathering and burning was probably dozens or even hundreds of times stronger than before. The scene was very magical. In fact, this was also the first time Yu Qianqiu had seen a master refiner in action. He could not help but click his tongue in wonder. The Ape King's expression was somewhat sluggish. After being dumbfounded for a while, it turned to look at the Grandmaster Nanming with a gaze filled with fanaticism. Half a day later, the giant spider's corpse began to emit waves of a disgusting stench. It was obvious that the high temperature of the rolling flames had destroyed its internal organs. It was estimated that all of its internal organs would be burnt to ashes soon. Then, a slightly red carapace gradually appeared in the greenish-white flames. When it turned completely red, the Grandmaster Nanming cast another spell into the formation. In an instant, it turned into a ball of burning flames that quickly spread out to its original state. The high temperature also quickly filled the entire belly of the mountain. The fire force has been penetrated. Ape King, you can begin now, the Grandmaster Nanming said with a confident smile. However, after the Ape King had seen the Grandmaster Nanming's methods, he did not seem so confident anymore. He cupped his hands in a humble manner and said, "Mr. Nanming is an expert in this field. There is no need for me to embarrass myself anymore." As he said this, he waved his arm and pointed at the red carapace. He said politely, "Please give me some pointers, Mr. Nanming." The Grandmaster Nanming looked at Yu Qianqiu to seek his opinion. Yu Qianqiu immediately coughed and interrupted. "Brother Ape, since you want Mr. Nanming to give you pointers, you should at least let Mr. Nanming take a look at your abilities first. Otherwise, how can he teach you? Brother Ape, why don't you display your refining methods to your heart's content? and let Mr. Nanming take a look first. All right, the Ape King was a straightforward person. After he cupped his hands in greeting at the Grandmaster Nanming, he took a step forward, and a majestic aura suddenly erupted from his body. The bones in his body made explosive sounds, and he seemed to have grown taller in an instant. His fiery red hair moved without any wind, and the muscles that were exposed outside the metal vest swelled. The muscles on his arms were like steel wires that were twisted together, protruding and wriggling. One look, and one could tell that he was filled with explosive power. Hi! The Ape King's right arm suddenly struck forward, and a huge shadow of an illusory palm grabbed the red carapace. After that, he twisted his body and waved his arm at incredible speed, throwing the red carapace behind him. With a dang, it landed steadily on the dark platform behind him. Then, the Ape King suddenly spread out his arms. Wong, red flames instantly erupted from his body and enveloped his entire body. Under the astonished gaze of the Grandmaster Nanming, the Ape King charged towards the red carapace like a cannonball while carrying raging flames. He took advantage of the momentum and struck out a huge shadow of his fist at lightning speed, smashing it on the red carapace. Dang! Bright sparks flew everywhere. The first punch was followed by thousands of punches. Deafening dang, sounds that were as dense as raindrops rang violently in the belly of the mountain, and bright sparks flew everywhere. In just a few breaths' time, countless figures that carried raging flames appeared around the red and transparent carapace. Tens of thousands of fiery fists struck out like a storm, and all of them landed heavily on the bright red carapace of the spider. It couldn't be, right? Yu Qianshou and the Grandmaster Nanming looked at this scene in a daze. Fiery fists surrounded the red carapace hammer in front of their eyes. Never in their dreams would they have thought that the Ape King would use his fists as hammers to hammer things. What was the difference between this and forging iron? Senior Nanming, with your eyesight, can you tell what he's doing? Yu Qianshou transmitted his voice to the Grandmaster Nanming. It should be the most primitive forging method, but I can't be sure. Let's wait and see. After the Grandmaster Nanming replied, his pupils suddenly shrank, and he stared at the dark platform that was enduring the forging. With the Ape King's cultivation, the countless heavy punches that he had unleashed could even cause a mountain to collapse. However, the black platform's endurance was so strong that it was unbelievable. No matter how many punches were thrown at it, it would not budge. After another half a day, the bright red carapace of the spider finally began to shrink bit by bit under the bombardment of countless heavy punches. Chapter 946. The strange thing was that after such a long time, the red color of the carapace should have gradually dimmed due to the heat dissipating. However, the spider's carapace didn't seem to be affected by the Ape King's concentrated attacks. Even after half a day had passed, it still maintained its bright red heat. Yu Qianshou understood the reason after pondering for a while. It was probably related to the Ape King's blazing fists and the raging flames that surged out of its body. The Ape King moved quickly with flames all over its body. It was as if it was using fire to wrap around the spider's carapace to prevent it from cooling down. In addition to the violent and concentrated blazing fists, even a piece of dark steel would be scorched by it. What a one-track mind! As Yu Qianshou sighed, he glanced at elder ancestor Nanming and immediately realized that something was wrong. He followed the elder's gaze and also noticed that there was something strange about the pitch-black platform. He transmitted his voice and asked, "Elder Nanming, is the platform that withstood the tempering a treasure?" "I can't tell what it is either, but it must be a treasure to be able to withstand such heavy attacks," elder ancestor Nanming said with certainty. 3 days passed by just like that. The spider's carapace had long changed beyond recognition. Its huge body that was about 10 meters long had become a 2-meter square metal block. Even so, the Ape King continued to swing its blazing fists. Not only did its momentum not weaken, the sounds became even more intense. Of course, this was related to the shrinking of its body and the shrinking of its range of movement. This way, the intensity of the attacks on the metal block became even more concentrated. When the 6th day passed, the 2-meter square metal block became less than a meter. Yu Qianqiu went from being dumbfounded to feeling numb. He couldn't help but admire the Ape King's profound cultivation. This was 6 consecutive days of intense consumption. Yu Qianqiu naturally didn't have the patience and time to stay here and slowly waste his time. Every day, he would go out to deal with his own matters and check out the surrounding terrain. However, Elder Ancestor Nanming's gaze gradually became fiery. He seemed to have understood something. He stared at the gradually shrinking metal block day after day without blinking. When Yu Qianqiu returned from his routine trip, he saw that the Ape King was still swinging its fists like rain. He cursed the Ape King in his heart for not being afraid of dying from exhaustion. After waiting for a while, he felt like he was about to doze off again. When he saw that Grandmaster Nanming was full of energy, he sent him a voice transmission out of boredom. "Senior Nanming, is there any meaning to this fellow's actions?" "Yes, of course there is." Grandmaster Nanming was a little excited as he transmitted his voice and exclaimed, "So that's how it is." Who would have thought that a stupid method would have its own benefits? Fortunately, he was gifted. If it was someone else, no matter how high their cultivation was, it would be difficult for them to continuously temper themselves and return to their original state. Every time he punches, some of the impurities in the metal will be expelled. If this continues, all the impurities in the metal will be expelled until it can no longer shrink. At that time, what will be left will be the essence of the metal. "I see. What are the benefits?" Yu Qianqiu asked. He pondered that if the effect was really great, his gold incantation should be able to display its usefulness in this aspect. It would be much better than the Ape King's stupid method. Grandmaster Nanming explained excitedly. "You must know that the purer the quality of the material, the stronger its extensibility and capacity. For example, a piece of pig iron, if it hasn't been tempered to remove its impurities, its extensibility will definitely be very poor and it will break easily. However, after being tempered to remove its impurities, you will be able to bend it, but it won't break easily. This is extensibility. In other words, it can contain more formations, and the treasures refined will also be of higher quality. This is a great benefit to the refiner. Moreover, this material is the shell of the rainbow temple spider, which is already abnormally hard." His explanation immediately piqued Yu Qianqiu's interest. He couldn't help but look forward to the Ape King's early completion. In the end, they waited for the 10th day. As the storm-like fiery fists gradually died down, the flames on the Ape King's body also disappeared. Finally, it stopped while sweating profusely and panting. With a pale face, it walked down with a palm-sized piece of metal that was still fiery red. However, its body was a little shaky. It was obvious that it had used up a lot of its cultivation. This big spider's body contains a lot of armor essence. In the past, I hunted 1,000 ordinary rainbow temple spiders, but the amount of armor essence in one of its bodies was not even as much. "Mr. Nanming, what do you think?" the Ape King said while panting. Yu Qianqiu's gaze was filled with admiration as he looked at the Ape King. At this moment, the consumption of his cultivation was probably 80 to 90% of his prime. If he encountered someone with ulterior motives, it could be said to be the most dangerous moment. However, it had no distractions towards the two of them. It was a sincere and magnanimous person, worth associating with. Not bad, not bad. Such a good thing can be said to be perfect. It can definitely be used to refine a top-notch treasure. The Nanming patriarch exclaimed in admiration as he held the piece of metal that was gradually cooling. However, he then said with some regret, "It's a pity that there's too little. Otherwise, I would exhaust all my abilities to display my expertise in this and see what kind of good treasure I can refine." "There's more here," the Ape King shouted hurriedly. Then, it eagerly took off the vest and boots on its feet and offered them with both hands. As long as Mr. is willing to teach me how to refine treasures, I am willing to give all of these to you. The Nanming patriarch was stunned. He took the items in the Ape King's hands and compared them. Only then did he realize that they were made of the same material as the piece of metal. In his excitement, he glanced at Yu Qianqiu. He seemed to be a little hesitant. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and said, "Brother Ape, the art of refining treasures is Mr. Nanming's specialty. He usually won't teach it to outsiders. If you acknowledge him as your master, then it'll be a different story." As he spoke, he even gave the Ape King a look. The Ape King was stunned, but he immediately reacted. He knelt down at the Nanming patriarch and bowed. Disciple Yuan Hong pays respect to master. The Nanming patriarch's expression froze. He transmitted his voice to Yu Qianqiu. "This is too childish. His cultivation base is much higher than mine. How can I be his master? You're being pedantic. There's no seniority in learning. The one who's accomplished comes first. Besides, he's not asking you to teach him cultivation. He's learning your skills in refining treasures. In this aspect, you're good enough to be his master." Yu Qianqiu transmitted his voice. "Besides, there's only benefits to you if you can take in a disciple with such a high cultivation base. At the same time, it'll also be beneficial to my future arrangements. Just take it as giving me face and take him in. As for how much you should teach him, it's up to you. No one can force you to do this, right?" He had his own plans. He had brought the army of Utopia to the Divine Ruin Realm for two reasons. Firstly, he was prepared to use the ferocious beasts in the Divine Ruin Realm to train them. Secondly, he wanted the army to use the training opportunity to collect the inner cores of the ferocious beasts so as to help by Sujin master the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra as soon as possible. However, this area was the Ape King's territory. It would be beneficial for the army of Utopia to have a good relationship with the Ape King. It would be even better if they could take care of him. Just as he was pondering how he could forge a good relationship with the Ape King, the Nanming Patriarch's appearance solved the problem. The Nanming Patriarch pondered for a while before freeing one of his hands to help the kneeling Ape King up. "Since that's the case, I'll take you in. Get up." "Thank you, Master." The Ape King cupped his hands in excitement and stood up. He could not suppress the agitation on his face. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and shook his head with a bitter smile. He felt envious and speechless toward this kind of person who was obsessed with something simple and pure. Then he stretched out his hand and took the Ape King's smelly boots from the Nanming Patriarch's hands. He then took out the big spider's jaws. He held one item in each hand and closed his eyes to sense them carefully. The Nanming Patriarch and the Ape King looked at him in confusion. They did not know what he was going to do. "I see. I understand now." After Yu Qianqiu felt the difference in the structure of the items in his hands, he opened his eyes and threw the smelly boots in his right hand back to the Nanming Patriarch. Then he activated the Nanming art. The dust from the spider's jaws danced in the air and gradually became smaller. Soon, a small light golden metal ball appeared in his hand. The Ape King was secretly shocked. He naturally knew how hard the jaws were. They were the hardest part of a spider's body and also the part that contained the densest amount of armor essence. However, he did not expect that they would be turned into ashes in the blink of an eye in Yu Qianqiu's hands. It was too terrifying. He did not know how high this person's cultivation was. That was not all. Yu Qianqiu took out the 8 spider legs one by one and performed the same Nanming art. In a short while, a total of 9 metal balls appeared in his hands. Yu Qianqiu held them in one palm and extended them in front of the Nanming Patriarch and the Ape King. He asked with a smile, "Master and disciple, take a look. Is this the same thing that Ape Yuan Hong refined?" The master and disciple picked up a metal ball suspiciously and examined it. After looking at it, both of them were shocked. The Ape King's face became even paler. He had used his proudest and most capable ability to refine something that he had spent many days to refine, but in the hands of this person, he could do it in just a snap of his fingers. The difference was too big. The Nanming Patriarch was flabbergasted. "How did you do it?" Yu Qianqiu did not think much of it and stuffed the 9 metal balls into the Nanming Patriarch's arms. He said with a smile, "I'll give this to you. Even though it's a little lacking, it shouldn't be a problem to refine this little guy, right? Do me a favor. When you're free, help me refine a good treasure." As he said this, he pointed at the dark platform and asked the Ape King, "Yuan Hong, what is this? Why does it feel even harder than the Temple Rainbow Spider's armor essence?" The Nanming Patriarch looked over. This was actually a question he wanted to ask as well. The Ape King shook his head. "It is indeed harder than the Temple Rainbow Spider's armor essence, but I don't know what it is. Its original form is a huge meteorite that flew from the heavens and landed nearby. I saw that it contained quite a lot of metal, so I broke the meteorite apart and brought it back in batches to be smelted. I used the same refining method as before and used 50,000 years on and off. In the end, it ended up like this." Chapter 9:47. Yu Qianqiu walked to the black platform that was 3 to 4 meters thick, 100 meters long, and 40 to 50 meters wide to take a look. He could not help but sigh inwardly. This old monkey was really persistent. He had actually spent almost 50,000 years to refine this huge metal plate. It really left him speechless. He then turned his head back and asked curiously, "Yuan Hong, since it's harder than the Rainbow Temple Spider's armor essence, why don't you use it to refine the armor you're wearing?" "I'm really ashamed." The Ape King cupped his hands at the Nanming Patriarch and explained, "It's not that I don't want to. It's because this thing is too hard. My clumsy method of forging a huge piece of metal is still passable, but it's too difficult to forge it into a well-connected armor. It's so difficult that I had no choice but to give up. It just so happens that the thing I'm forging lacks a sturdy base, so I made do with it. But now that Master is here, I'm sure Master will have a way to solve this." He then pointed at the crushed stones that were emitting the red light of the earth fire on the ground at the center of the mountain and said, "These crushed stones are the remains of that meteorite from beyond the heavens. There's still some metal in them, but it's precisely because I have no use for them after refining them that I might as well fill the earth fire and use them as scattered anvils when refining things." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly when he heard that. He stroked his chin and looked at the huge metal plate under his feet. His eyes lit up slightly as he asked, "Mr. Nanming, I'm sure the treasure refined from this thing won't be inferior to the Rainbow Temple Spider's armor essence, right?" The Nanming Patriarch walked forward and formed a strange and special complicated hand seal. He brewed a spell and cast it into the black platform. After examining it closely for a while, he said in astonishment and excitement, "It's really good stuff. It's 10 times stronger than the Rainbow Temple Spider's armor essence. It's such a waste to use such a good thing as a base." Yu Qianqiu's eyes immediately lit up, and he said, "Then how about we refine it into a treasure?" The Ape King's eyes also lit up, but when he saw the inspection spell cast by the Nanming Patriarch, his eyes lit up as well. "It's naturally good to be able to refine it into a treasure, but it's a pity." Grandmaster Nanming shook his head slightly and sighed. "It's a pity that my cultivation base is a little low, so it's hard for me to add formations to it when I'm refining it. If I'm not careful, it'll be ruined." The biggest problem was that it was just as Yuan Hong had said. Casting was truly difficult. Even if one used a special method, it would take more than 10 years to refine a single treasure. Time is secondary. The main thing is, it's just too difficult. If your cultivation is raised to the immortal stage, can you add an array formation in here when you're refining? Yu Qianqiu asked. Patriarch Nanming was stunned. He then nodded and said, "If I can raise my cultivation to the celestial realm, it shouldn't be a big problem with my comprehension over the years. But how can it be so easy to raise my cultivation to the celestial realm?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and stopped arguing about this problem. He then asked, "Then if I help you cast the item you want to refine first, the time needed to refine, it should be greatly reduced, right?" When he said this, The Nanming Patriarch and the Ape King's eyes lit up at the same time. They both recalled his miraculous method just now. This matter was probably not a problem for him at all. The Nanming Patriarch clapped his hands and shouted, "This is the biggest problem. If you can cast it first, it'll greatly reduce the time needed to refine it. I can guarantee that you'll be able to refine a set of treasures in 10 days. However, after his excitement, his expression darkened again. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. But I'll say the ugly words first. With my current cultivation base, my control is not stable at all. There's still a high chance that it'll be ruined. Ha! The heavens are really on my side. Yu Qianshou suddenly laughed maniacally when he heard this. He then cupped his hands at the Nanming Patriarch and said, "Senior Nanming, I'll solve all the problems. You just need to help me refine a batch of treasures with this item. How about it?" Really? As soon as the Nanming Patriarch said this, he felt that it was a little inappropriate. He looked at the Ape King and said, "Yuan Hong, this is yours. I'll have to ask for your permission first." Yu Qianshou immediately narrowed his eyes and stared at Yuan Hong. If he dared to stop him, then don't blame him for being impolite. Disciple will listen to Master's arrangements. But Disciple has a request. The Ape King bowed a little nervously and said, "Disciple only asks that when Master refines the treasures, Disciple can be allowed to learn by the side. Even if it's to be an assistant to gain experience, it's fine." After he finished speaking, he did not dare to raise his head. Although he was now the disciple of the Nanming Patriarch, he was used to ruling over this area and being the overlord. It could be said that bad habits were hard to change. Otherwise, why would a disciple raise conditions to their master? But this was already a very big change. It would probably take some time to settle everything in one go. At the very least, he had to wait until the Nanming Patriarch revealed his methods of refining treasures and convinced him wholeheartedly. Otherwise, it was very possible that he would kill the Nanming Patriarch, his master, in a fit of unhappiness. After all, the ethics within the ruins of God could not be compared to the outside world. It was inevitable that the dignified Ape King would have some wild nature and temper. Of course, the main reason why he was nervous when he said this was because Yu Qianshou was by his side. The key was that the methods that Yu Qianshou had revealed were too intimidating, so he could not help but be afraid. As expected, when Yu Qianshou heard this, he snorted coldly and said, "Yuan Hong, I've given you some face, but you still want to take advantage of me. Do you believe that I'll teach you a lesson right now? I'm warning you. If anything happens to Mr. Nanming here, I'll immediately make sure that not a single living thing can be found in this flaming mountain, starting from you." The Ape King was speechless. When this guy had just arrived, he was still acting like he was close with his brother. Why did he suddenly turn hostile now? He could not help but look at the Nanming Patriarch with a pleading look. The Nanming Patriarch immediately waved his hand at Yu Qianshou, indicating that he should stop talking. He said to the Ape King, "Since you've acknowledged me as your master, I'll naturally teach you what I should teach you. However, I don't want to hear about this bargaining a second time. Otherwise, our relationship as master and disciple will end here. I'll forget about it this time. I'm refining treasures here, so naturally, I need someone to help me. You can start learning from me." "Thank you, Master." The Ape King bowed excitedly. Yu Qianshou immediately walked over and patted his shoulder. He said with a smile, "That's right. As a disciple, you should act like a disciple. Otherwise, what's the point of being a disciple? Don't you think so?" He could turn hostile and laugh whenever he wanted, but a straightforward person like the Ape King could not get used to it. He could only cup his hands awkwardly and said, "I've learned something." Actually, as long as he did not do anything out of line, Yu Qianshou did not plan to do anything to him. He was just trying to scare him just now so that he would have some scruples in his heart. This was also to save him trouble in the future. Since the matter was over, Yu Qianshou no longer pestered him. He immediately took out a great restriction-breaking pill, a marrow cleansing pill, and an immortal ascension pill. He pulled the Nanming Patriarch over and explained how to use them and the symptoms that would appear. Finally, he stuffed them into the Nanming Patriarch's hand. "This Is this real? The Nanming patriarch looked at the pill in his hand in disbelief. The Ape King did not think that what Yu Qianqiu said was a lie. Instead, he became even more wary of Yu Qianqiu. My character is famous for being good. You don't believe others, but you don't believe me? Don't worry and take it. Just deal with it according to what I say. Yu Qianqiu urged him to start quickly and not waste time. Old ancestor Nanming was both excited and skeptical. If Yu Qianqiu didn't praise his character, he would have directly consumed it. But once Yu Qianqiu praised his character, he immediately became a little timid. Others did not know, but he had been with Nongzhu for a long time. He often heard Nongzhu talk about the dirty things that Yu Qianqiu had done. The Yu Qianqiu in Nongzhu's mouth could be said to be a person who did all kinds of good and bad things. It would be strange if the Nanming patriarch was not afraid. However, when he thought about it, Yu Qianqiu did not have the intention to harm him. With his current cultivation, if he wanted to harm him, he could do it directly. There was no need to go around in such a big circle. In addition, with Yu Qianqiu's unceasing urging, the Nanming patriarch gritted his teeth and walked to the center of the dark platform. He sat down cross-legged and took the limit-breaking pill. The facts proved that Yu Qianqiu did not lie to him. When his cultivation successfully broke through to the final stage of soul formation with the help of the Spirit Stone, the Nanming patriarch was immediately excited. He did not expect that he would break through the shackles that he had not broken through for so many years in one go. Of course, he had just taken a limit-breaking pill, so the toxins in his body were not heavy. Thus, he did not suffer much. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would really doubt Yu Qianqiu's intentions. The Ape King saw with his own eyes that his master's cultivation broke through just like that. The shock in his heart could be imagined. The Nanming patriarch had no more scruples now. Without the urging of Yu Qianqiu, he quickly swallowed the marrow-cleansing pill. After tossing and turning his body black, the Immortal Ascension pill was stuffed into his mouth like candy. However, he suffered a little this time. However, Yu Qianqiu had already told him in advance, and he was already mentally prepared. He gritted his teeth and finally endured it. His cultivation successfully stepped into the early stage of minor immortal. This is real. I really stepped into the immortal realm? The Nanming patriarch checked the changes in his body. He still could not believe it. He felt like he was dreaming. Did he really break through to the immortal realm that he dreamed of so easily? At the side, the Ape King looked at Yu Qianqiu as if he was looking at a god. He muttered in his heart, "If I get on good terms with him, will he be able to help me improve my cultivation? All right, stop dreaming. Put on your clothes first. After I help you forge an immortal body, you will be considered to have truly stepped into the ranks of immortal cultivators." It's still too early to be happy. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand as if he was used to this scene. Looking at the old man's naked body was really boring. The Nanming patriarch was a little too excited. He no longer cared about being shy. After putting on his clothes, he obediently stood beside Yu Qianqiu and waited for instructions. In the past, he had never been so obedient in front of Bai Changchun. Yu Qianqiu also wanted to hurry up and get things done. He had too many things on hand and had no time to waste. Thus, he led the Nanming patriarch outside, and the two of them flew to the peak of Flaming Mountain. How could the Ape King let go of such an opportunity to broaden his horizons? He braced himself and followed them. After Yu Qianqiu told the Nanming patriarch some things to take note of, he glanced at the Ape King who was standing nearby and watching weakly. He secretly pinched the purple flames in each of his palms and placed them on his back. He stood on the peak of the mountain with the demeanor of a grandmaster. Facing the heaven and earth, he shouted, "There is righteousness in the heaven and earth. Wind, fire, thunder, and lightning, listen to my command." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.